Arden Blackwood had expected candlelight, champagne, and maybe a playful toast about how 50 is the new 45. What he got instead was the beginning of a nightmare packaged neatly in a thick envelope that landed on the table with a heavy thud. The Grand Royal Hotel's ballroom shimmered under an ornate crystal chandelier. Soft violin music wove through the air, and waitstaff in crisp vests glided among guests who murmured polite birthday wishes. A six-tiered chocolate cake waited at the far end of the room, each layer trimmed in gold leaf that caught and reflected the warm glow of overhead lights. It should have felt celebratory. Yet the moment Arden stepped inside, he sensed something was off. People seemed to be smiling too hard. Eyes flicked his way and darted elsewhere, as though no one wanted to hold his gaze for long. He scanned the room and spotted his wife, Liliana Blackwood, on the other side of a circular table draped in white linen. She wore a sleek, dark blue evening gown that hugged her figure, an exquisite diamond pendant, a recent gift from someone certainly not. Arden gleamed at her throat. Leaning in close beside her stood Dorian Hayes, the family's financial advisor. He offered Liliana a fluted glass of champagne and whispered something that made her laugh, a brief, confident laugh that sent a spike of unease through Arden's chest. To Liliana's right, 17-year-old Amelia Blackwood crossed her arms and fiddled with the edge of the tablecloth. Her gaze flicked to her mother, then to Arden, a slight frown tugging at her lips. Beside Amelia sat Lucas, her twin brother, hunched and silent, eyes pinned to the floor. Arden swallowed back the knot in his throat. He'd been delayed at Blackwood's securities office, another crisis with a high-profile client. Running late to a big event wasn't new for him, but tonight the tension in the air felt dangerously charged. He made his way over, forcing a steady smile. "Sorry," he said, looking around the table. "I know I'm late. Let's blame Boston traffic." No one laughed. In fact, the only audible reaction was the slight rasp of Liliana's manicured fingernails tapping the envelope she now held in her hand. Without preamble, she placed it in front of him. A hush fell over the immediate circle of guests. Even Dorian took a measured step back, although the satisfied curve of his lips remained. "Happy birthday, Arden," Liliana announced. Her voice was low, yet carried a chilling resonance in the quiet. "I think it's time we stop pretending everything's fine." Arden frowned as he glanced at the envelope, then back at Liliana's inscrutable face. "Liliana, what is this?" She didn't blink. "Divorce papers." For a second, every sound in the ballroom seemed to vanish. The violins blurred into a distant hum, and Arden's breath caught in his lungs. He could feel Amelia and Lucas shift uneasily behind Liliana, could feel the stares of countless onlookers. "Liliana," he said softly, "what are you talking about?" She leveled him with a gaze colder than the crystals overhead. "Exactly what it sounds like. I'm done." She paused, then turned to the tall man behind her. "Dorian has been helping me prepare. I believe you're also acquainted with Judge Alistair Rowland?" A gray-haired man standing nearby inclined his head. His expression was studiously neutral. "It can all be handled swiftly, Mr. Blackwood." The word swiftly twisted in Arden's gut like a knife. He glanced at Amelia, her eyes darted away. Lucas remained still, shoulders tight. Neither said a word. Dorian stepped forward, raising his champagne flute. "I'm sure we can keep this civilized," he murmured. "After all, we only want what's best for everyone." His tone held the faintest thread of triumph. Arden's gaze flicked from the papers to Liliana. This was how she wanted to do it? Publicly? On his birthday? A torrent of questions clashed in his mind. Why now? How could she? And why was Dorian so invested in all this? He drew in a deep breath. "Liliana," he said carefully, "maybe we should step outside and—" "No," she cut him off, her voice rising enough that a few nearby guests turned to watch. "You've had years to notice we were falling apart, but you were too busy with your precious firm. This ends tonight." Arden let the breath out slowly. On the periphery of his vision, he saw Amelia's anguished expression, Lucas's drawn face. Everyone else in the room, friends, acquaintances, business associates, seemed riveted, eyes shining with morbid curiosity. He looked at the envelope once more. Part of him wanted to rip it open, see what sort of humiliating terms Liliana had spelled out. But he knew better than to react on impulse. especially in front of an audience that included both Dorian and a ready-to-sign judge. With deliberate calm, Arden set the papers aside. "I'm not signing anything tonight." Dorian tisked softly, swirling champagne in his glass. "No need to drag this out, Arden. Let's not make it messier than it has to be." Liliana's jaw tightened. She stood straighter as though preparing for confrontation. "You really want to do this the hard way?" Arden met her gaze, the heartbreak behind his eyes carefully concealed. "Yes," he said, voice grim, "if that's my only option." Another uneasy hush enveloped them. From across the room, the final note of violin music drifted off into tense silence. Judge Rowland pursed his lips, then spoke in a measured tone. "Mr. Blackwood, if you refuse to proceed." Arden turned on his heel, leaving the judge's words hanging. He locked eyes with Amelia for a split second. She gave him nothing but a wounded half-glance that twisted his stomach. Then he turned, striding away from the table and through a pair of tall, carved doors leading into the corridor. He pulled out his phone, ignoring the stares of guests he brushed past. His voice, though quiet, was laced with urgency as he made a call. "Callum," he said, "we're moving forward, now." And with that, Arden Blackwood, on his 45th birthday, stepped into the gilded hallway, his heart hammering like war drums. No matter how poised Liliana and Dorian appeared, no matter how much the judge pretended a swift resolution was inevitable, Arden wasn't about to give in without a fight. Arden slammed his car door outside the Grand Royal Hotel and exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The night air, cool against his flushed skin, offered little solace. Moments ago, he had walked out on his own birthday celebration, if it could even be called that, leaving behind the woman who was once the center of his world. He needed a moment to think, to recalibrate. Pressing his forehead to the steering wheel, Arden closed his eyes. Strange how easily a handful of documents could upend everything. He tried to piece together where it all went wrong. His mind drifted to a time 5 years earlier. He'd just left the Special Operations Unit of the Marine Corps, determined to chart a new path in civilian life. With a modest chunk of savings and a knack for security protocols, he launched Blackwood Security BSEC, for short operating out of a converted garage. It wasn't glamorous at first, but the work gave him purpose. He was good at training detail teams, designing surveillance systems, advising on threat mitigation. Every day was a challenge, but one that he embraced. He still remembered how Liliana had come into his life. He'd been asked to give a quick talk on personal safety at a small charity function in downtown Boston. She was there, wearing a simple black dress, her long hair swept into a low bun that accentuated her delicate features. She'd approached him afterward with a bright smile. "I'm Liliana," she introduced herself. "Loved your talk, though you made it sound so dangerous." Arden had laughed, a bit taken aback by her directness. "Real life can be dangerous," he'd replied, "but that's why I do what I do." That night they ended up talking until the event staff started stacking chairs. She'd found his stories of military life thrilling, yet admired his non-nonsense approach to personal security. He, in turn, was captivated by her curiosity, her warmth, and the way she seemed genuinely interested in his experiences. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony by the harbor. He felt unstoppable. He had a blossoming security firm, a loving wife, and soon, the promise of children. Life, he thought at the time, was good. The memories made his chest ache. What happened to that earnest woman who once teased him about being too serious, but admired his sense of honor? He recalled long conversations on their tiny balcony, night breezes carrying laughter and the smell of homemade pasta. They'd planned to travel the world once BSEC took off and finances allowed. Finances did improve, though, quickly. BSEC began securing contracts with corporate clients, then a few high-roller individuals who appreciated Arden's discreet style. New doors opened, and more money flowed in. Liliana found herself increasingly drawn to exclusive clubs and social gatherings, places where old money and new ambitions mingled. Arden had often been busy or out of town, focusing on the next big contract. Meanwhile, Liliana gravitated toward the social sphere, forging connections that left him feeling slightly out of place. Back in the car, Arden shook away the visions of their early, happier days. In the present moment, he could still feel the sting of betrayal. Liliana hadn't just drifted away, she had stage-managed a spectacle, handing him divorce papers in front of a polished crowd. A low buzz from his phone tore him from the spiral of memories. Callum Delacroix's name flashed on the screen. Arden answered. "Arden?" came Callum's gruff voice. "I saw how they blindsided you in there. You good?" Arden glanced at the hotel's entrance. He imagined Liliana and Dorian still inside, entertaining whispers and curious stares. "I'm standing," he said, an edge to his tone. "And I'm ready. Let's meet first thing tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss." "Copy that," Callum replied. "Hang in there, boss." Ending the call, Arden straightened behind the wheel. If Liliana thought he'd quietly surrender everything he'd built his business, his reputation, she was in for a surprise. But for now, he simply drove off into the dark, the city lights glowing cold against the horizon, carrying with him the echo of a once warm past that had turned so suddenly bitter. The next morning, sunlight spilled across Arden's sparse office in South Boston. Walls lined with training certificates and a shelf filled with dog-eared tactical manuals offered a stark contrast to his internal turmoil. He rubbed his eyes, fatigue evident from a restless night spent wrestling with the image of Liliana's calm, unyielding face. Their relationship hadn't always been so combative. There were days like when Amelia and Lucas were born where he felt sure the future held nothing but joy. Back then, their house was a modest two-bedroom near the harbor. No one would call it luxurious, but it was enough for two newlyweds with big dreams. When Liliana discovered she was pregnant with twins, the place exploded with excitement. Arden put in new locks and security cameras. A father's paranoia, he'd joked. Liliana scoured baby catalogs for matching cribs. He recalled the day they brought Amelia and Lucas home from the hospital. Liliana looked radiant, her hair in a messy bun, her cheeks flushed with pride. "They're perfect," she'd breathed, gazing at the sleeping infants. And for a moment, Arden believed nothing could break the bond they'd forged. Yet, as BSEC gained momentum, the family dynamics shifted. What started as a handful of corporate security gigs ballooned into a round-the-clock endeavor. Arden found himself traveling to client sites in New York, Chicago, even Los Angeles, sometimes staying weeks at a time. He hated being away, but the contracts were lucrative, and each success seemed to promise a better life for Liliana and the kids. While he jetted around, Liliana transformed into a mother who managed everything at home. She shuttled Amelia and Lucas to dance recitals, soccer practice, and the pediatrician. She balanced schedules, organized family birthdays, and occasionally dropped by Arden's office with lunch when his stress was too high. But the demands of child-rearing and the creeping sense of monotony started to weigh on her. When the twins were about 10, Liliana began socializing with other parents from well-off families in Boston's more affluent circles. Dinners at exclusive restaurants replaced simple evenings at home. The notion of needing to keep up emerged designer clothes, a bigger house, the kind of private schooling that cost more annually than many people's entire mortgage. Arden hadn't opposed these changes outright. In truth, he wanted Liliana and the kids to have every advantage. If that meant working an extra contract or traveling an extra mile, he'd do it. But with each year, the gap widened. Amelia and Lucas thrived in academic clubs, sports, and music. They grew used to a comfortable lifestyle. Meanwhile, Liliana found a sense of identity in the swirl of lavish parties and refined social sets. Arden, in contrast, was a man shaped by discipline and practicality. The same traits that made him valuable in high-stakes security situations sometimes left him ill at ease in those plush gatherings. It wasn't that he disliked money, he appreciated financial stability. But the extravagance, the constant measuring up, the subtle competition it grated on him, and Liliana seemed ever more fascinated by it. He stared at the coffee cup on his desk, half empty and gone cold. The squeak of the office door hinges announced someone's arrival. "Boss?" Callum Delacroix poked his head in. Tall, broad-shouldered, ex-military Callum was the one person Arden trusted implicitly. "We still on for that morning briefing?" Arden nodded, standing. "Yeah, let's head to the conference room." As they made their way, Callum shot him a concerned glance. "I know it's personal, but you realize Liliana's trying to claim you've basically abandoned her and the kids, right?" Arden ground his teeth. "Abandoned?" I busted my back building this company so they could have a good life. I never wanted them to want for anything. They reached the small conference space, a bare-bones room with a basic wooden table and a large whiteboard. Nothing fancy. Arden sank into a chair. "Callum," he said, his voice subdued, "I failed somewhere along the line, didn't I? I should have seen this coming." His friend shrugged gently. "Maybe, but it's not all on you. Things change, people change. Doesn't mean you just give up." A brief silence settled. Outside, the city was alive with traffic and commerce, oblivious to Arden's private storm. He exhaled, forcing composure. "I'm not giving up," he said, "no matter what Liliana thinks." The conviction in his words felt steadier than the roiling in his gut. Yet, the memory of that envelope, the galling look in Dorian's eyes, and the uncertain expressions on his children's faces refused to fade. Late that afternoon, Amelia and Lucas were home from school, seated at the dining table scattered with textbooks and half-eaten sandwiches. Liliana wasn't around. She was likely at some charity luncheon, or so Amelia mentioned in passing. Arden was supposed to be out securing a new contract, but he'd come home early, determined to reconnect with his children if he could. He found them quietly working on homework. "Hey," he greeted, doing his best to sound casual. "How was school?" Amelia offered a non-committal shrug without looking up from her geometry worksheet. Lucas mumbled something about band practice, eyes skimming a page of music theory. Arden hesitated. They'd been so open with him once, bounding over with bright chatter about friends or tests. Now, an invisible wall had descended. "Listen," he began, stepping closer. "I know things are complicated right now. I just want you to know you can talk to me if you need anything." The twins exchanged a glance, one of those silent sibling communications. Then Amelia set her pencil down. "Is it true you and Mom are splitting up?" Her tone was more accusing than curious. Arden felt the words tighten around his chest. "Your mother and I are." A chime from the doorbell interrupted him. Relief and dread mingled as he walked to open it. On the other side stood Dorian Hayes, a single white rose in hand and a knowing smile on his face. "Mr. Blackwood," Dorian said smoothly. "I hope I'm not intruding." Arden fought the urge to slam the door. "What do you want?" Dorian's gaze flicked past Arden, eyeing the interior as if he owned the place. "Liliana asked me to drop off some financial paperwork for her. Something about rebalancing certain assets. Mind if I come in?" Before Arden could respond, Dorian slipped through the threshold with a practiced confidence. "Amelia, Lucas," he called, spotting them by the table. "How are my favorite students?" Arden bristled at the ease with which Dorian addressed his kids. Amelia straightened, shyly smiling, while Lucas abandoned his music sheets to greet the newcomer. "We're okay," Amelia answered, suddenly more animated than she'd been with Arden. "I'm about to start applying for some summer programs, and Dorian said he has connections." Arden's jaw clenched. He hadn't known anything about these summer programs or Dorian's supposed help. Dorian flicked a look at Arden and then continued, "I've got friends at a few prestigious institutions. I'd be thrilled to provide recommendations for you both." Lucas's eyes brightened. "Seriously? That'd be great." Arden cleared his throat. "That's generous, Dorian, but I'd prefer to handle my kids' education decisions as a family." A flash of amusement crossed Dorian's face. "Of course. I'm only offering guidance, not stepping on anyone's toes." He extended the white rose to Amelia. "For your mother, whenever she returns." Amelia took it with an awkward half-smile. "Sure, I'll make sure she gets it." Dorian turned to Arden, smoothing the sleeves of his tailored suit. "Since you're here, Mr. Blackwood, maybe you and I should chat about the future. After all, Liliana and I—" He paused, a calculated glimmer in his eye. "We want what's best for everyone." Arden swallowed hard. "I think you've done enough for now." "Understood." Dorian dipped his head, then handed over a slender manila folder. "Give these documents to Liliana, please. I'll let myself out." With a parting grin aimed at the twins, Dorian strolled back toward the door, leaving a palpable tension in his wake. Arden closed the door behind him, turning to face Amelia and Lucas. Both looked at him expectantly, though neither spoke. If they were waiting for an explanation about Dorian, about the papers, about the fiasco at the hotel, Arden wasn't sure where to begin. Moments later, Amelia broke the silence. "He's not that bad," she said softly, as though reading Arden's disapproval. "He's helped Mom a lot. He actually listens." Lucas nodded in quiet agreement. Arden felt something splinter inside him. "I see," he managed. Then, lacking any better response, he retreated to the den, leaving his children in the dining room with their books and their unspoken loyalties. In that heavy silence, only one truth echoed in Arden's mind. Dorian Hayes was no mere family friend. He was an invader, one who already had a foothold in Arden's home. Late evening rain pelted the windshield of Arden Blackwood's SUV, each droplet like a needle in the dark. The city lights of Boston blurred behind a curtain of water as he drove aimlessly, mind spinning with fragments of Liliana's cool announcement from earlier that night. She had served him divorce papers on his own birthday, an action both cruel and clinical, and now he couldn't seem to chase away that image of her handing over the thick envelope. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Thunder rumbled somewhere overhead, and a jagged slash of lightning illuminated the deserted streets for a split second. Instead of heading back to the empty house, he found himself driving in circles, searching for clarity and finding none. His phone buzzed on the console. Callum Delacroix's name flashed on the screen. Arden welcomed the distraction. "Callum," he answered, attempting to keep his voice steady. The sound of pounding rain filtered into the call. "Hey, boss. I'm still at the office wrapping up that new client file," Callum began. There was a pause, then a note of concern crept into his tone. "You doing okay?" Arden exhaled. "I've been better. Let's just say Liliana wants things her way, and I'm not about to roll over." "Listen," Callum said. "That divorce stunt was nasty. If you want to fight it, you gotta have a plan. We both know she's getting advice from Dorian, and that guy plays dirty." A flash of memory tore through Arden's mind, Dorian leaning in at the dinner, lifting his champagne glass in smug triumph. For weeks, Arden had tried to ignore the warnings in his gut, the fleeting glimpses of Dorian's hand on Liliana's lower back. He'd chalked it up to paranoia. Now, though, it felt all too real. He flicked on the wipers at full speed, but the downpour was relentless. "Callum, I'm not signing anything yet. We need to figure out what's really going on. She's claiming I've neglected the family. Meanwhile, I suspect there's more to Dorian's interest in my finances than we know." Thunder boomed directly overhead, shaking the SUV's cabin. Through the windshield, the neon sign of a closed diner flickered in the stormy darkness. Arden pulled into the empty lot and parked under a sputtering streetlight. "You suspect Liliana and Dorian are," Callum began. Arden clenched his jaw. "Let's just say I've seen enough to suspect an affair. But we're not dealing with a mere fling either. I worry he's manipulating her. And if that's the case, we're talking about my firm, my kids, everything on the line." Callum's voice hardened. "Then we need proof, and a contingency plan if we're right." Arden nodded, as if Callum could see him. "Exactly. Keep your eyes open at Biasek. Any sign of unusual paperwork, unauthorized changes, you let me know." Silence hummed in the line for a moment. The downpour hammered the roof like stones. "Will do," Callum said. "Listen, if you need somewhere to crash tonight, maybe you don't want to go home. My place is always open." Arden's eyes stung with gratitude. "Thanks, but I should head back. Kids might be there, and—" He swallowed. Amelia and Lucas had been at the party, looking so conflicted. "I should at least try to explain things. All right, drive safe. Storm's bad out." He hung up, letting the quiet fill the cabin. He stared at the diner's neon sign, half the letters flickering out, leaving only a ghostly din. The buzzing light reminded him of how incomplete everything felt right now. A memory slid into focus. A few months ago, he'd come home late to find Liliana sipping wine in their dimly lit living room. He'd noticed a brief moment of tension when he kissed her cheek, as though she'd been expecting someone else. Later that night, he spotted Dorian's name on her phone screen. She'd brushed it off as business talk about investments. Arden slammed a fist softly against the dashboard. "I should have paid closer attention," he muttered to the empty car. A fresh bolt of lightning lit up the sky, revealing twisted skeletal branches of a gnarled oak tree on the roadside. The thunder that followed echoed like cannon fire. It was a night for upheaval, a night that mirrored Arden's internal chaos, stormy, violent, and unrelenting. With a heavy sigh, he started the engine again. He had no intention of giving in to Liliana's demands, especially if Dorian Hayes was pulling the strings. If that meant wading into the dark corners of his own marriage to uncover the truth, so be it. He pulled out of the diner lot, merging back onto the slick streets. Raindrops streaked the windows, distorting streetlights into blurry halos. As he turned toward home, a single phrase repeated in his mind, "I won't let them take everything." And so, in the cradle of a storm, Arden Blackwood prepared for the battle ahead, a battle for his family, his livelihood, and the remnants of his heart. The digital clock on the kitchen stove read 11:57 p.m. when Arden slipped into the house, drenched from the storm. The interior was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady drip of water from his coat onto the tile floor. He flicked on a lamp, bathing the open-concept living area in a soft glow. It felt strange, like someone else's home. Once, Liliana had filled the space with cozy rugs, bright floral curtains, and the faint aroma of vanilla candles. Now the house felt sterile, as though every personal touch had receded under a layer of tension. "Dad." Arden turned to see Lucas peering down from the second-floor landing, wearing an oversized t-shirt. The boy looked bleary-eyed, as though he'd just woken up. "Hey, bud," Arden whispered, trying to manage a reassuring smile. Lucas hovered for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he said, "Mom's not back yet. She left after the party. Amelia's in her room." A flicker of disappointment stabbed at Arden. He'd hoped to find Liliana already home, maybe corner her into a conversation, but it appeared she had other plans. "All right," he said. "Thanks." Lucas nodded, hesitating before adding, "I don't really get what happened tonight, but it was messed up." Arden sighed, raking a hand through his damp hair. "I know. We'll talk in the morning, okay? Try to get some rest." Without another word, Lucas retreated upstairs. Arden set his coat on a chair, wincing at the puddle pooling beneath it. He felt a surge of unease, imagining Liliana somewhere out in the storm, maybe with Dorian. The thought churned his stomach. Sometime past midnight, the front door clicked open. Arden, who had been pacing in the living room, snapped to attention. Liliana walked in, hair slightly tousled and mascara smudged around the corners of her eyes. She wore a fitted dress under a stylish trench coat and froze momentarily upon seeing him. "You're still up," she remarked flatly. He clenched his jaw. "Damn right I am. We need to talk." She tossed her purse onto a nearby armchair, crossing her arms. "Not sure there's much left to say. You made it clear you're refusing the divorce settlement." Arden scoffed. "Refusing? You practically ambushed me with that envelope in front of half the city's elite. You didn't think I'd just smile and sign away everything?" Liliana's eyes flashed. "I don't care about your so-called everything. I care about a future that doesn't involve me playing second fiddle to your job." He took a step closer, lowering his voice to avoid waking the kids. "So this is about me working too much? Fine. Let's address that. But you don't file for divorce in the middle of a birthday celebration unless you're trying to make a statement or humiliate me." Her mouth tightened. It seemed like the only way to finally get your attention. For years, you've been gone, physically here but mentally checked out, always on the phone, always in protect mode for your clients instead of your own family. A brief flash of guilt flickered in his chest. "That's not fair," he retorted. "Blackwood Security was built to provide for you and the kids. I never wanted—" He stopped, inhaling sharply. "I never wanted this." Liliana scoffed softly. "And what about Dorian's role in all this?" he demanded, voice quivering with anger. "Don't tell me he's just a friend giving you financial advice." She hesitated, her gaze dropping momentarily to the floor. When she spoke, her tone was icy. "Dorian has been supportive, more supportive than you can imagine. He's listened, offered solutions while you were off in your own world." A spike of jealousy and betrayal twisted Arden's gut. "Solutions or manipulations? I'm not blind, Liliana. I see how he looks at you, and I've heard the rumors." She lifted her chin. "Maybe you should have paid attention sooner. But no, you spent your energy on Blackwood security, ignoring the fact that this marriage was dying. Her eyes glimmered in the low light with anger or tears, he couldn't be sure. If you won't change, we need to end it. Arden's hand balled into a fist at his side. End it on your terms with your new companion cheering from the sidelines. That's convenient, she retorted fiercely. At least he's there for me, which is more than I can say for you. A thick tension coiled between them, each breath heavy. Rain still hammered the windows, but it felt distant now, like white noise underscoring their fury. Something inside Arden cracked. He realized he was trembling, the reality of losing her despite all the resentment tugging at his heart. Liliana, he managed, voice low. Can't we just— No, she cut him off, stepping back as if his presence physically repelled her. I'm done. If you won't sign the papers, we'll do this the hard way. And trust me, Dorian knows how to make it painful. Her words struck him like a slap. She grabbed her purse and headed upstairs without another look back. Moments later, a bedroom door slammed, rattling the quiet house. Arden stood in the living room, the lamp's weak light casting shadows across his exhausted face. His breathing was ragged, each inhale tasting of dread. Even though he'd expected a confrontation, the sharp finality in her voice made his head spin. He sank onto the couch, mind racing. One thing was clear. Liliana was serious about leaving, and Dorian's involvement was far deeper than he'd feared. Thunder rumbled again, echoing in Arden's chest. The next morning, muted sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, revealing the aftermath of the confrontation. Arden's coat still hung over a chair to dry, and a puddle had pooled beneath it on the tile. He stepped around the water, half dazed from only a few hours of restless sleep. He found Amelia and Lucas at the dining table, sipping orange juice and picking at some hastily made toast. An uneasy quiet hovered over them. Liliana was nowhere to be seen. Arden cleared his throat. Morning. Amelia glanced up, her eyes shadowed from lack of rest. Lucas just gave a slight nod. They looked uncertain, as though they couldn't decide if they were angry, worried, or both. Where's your mom? Arden asked, voice husky. She left early, Amelia replied. Said she had business to handle. Her tone was guarded, almost accusing. Dad, what really happened at the party? You two looked ready to tear each other apart. Arden tried to find the right words. He hated how grown-up his daughter sounded now, forced to deal with adult issues. Your mother wants a divorce, he said gently. You saw that? Lucas set down his glass. But that's insane. She basically ambushed you. You're not just going to let this happen, right? His voice wavered between frustration and concern. Arden sighed, running a hand across his stubbled jaw. I'm trying to figure out the best course of action, but it's complicated. Amelia frowned, pushing her plate away. Why's Dorian always hanging around then? He's been consulting Mom for months. He gives us advice to college stuff, extracurriculars. He seems to care. A bitter taste filled Arden's mouth. He's made himself indispensable, yes. But I'm not sure his motives are pure. You two should be cautious around him. Lucas looked unconvinced. He's never done anything weird to us, though. Honestly, he's been more supportive about my music than you have, Dad. You're always gone. The reproach in his son's voice cut deep, but Arden steadied himself. I know. My work has taken me away at times, but that doesn't mean Dorian's a saint. Amelia's gaze dropped to the table. We're not kids anymore, Dad. We get that you've been busy, but it's not fair to blame Dorian for stepping in when you weren't here. Arden felt a pang of guilt twisting his chest. He swallowed, forcing his voice to remain calm. Look, we can talk about that. I want to be here for you both, but for now, just keep your guard up. If Dorian asks you to do anything that feels off, or if he tries to get you on his side, let me know. They exchanged a quick look, something unspoken passing between them. Before either could answer, the front door opened. Callum Delacroix poked his head in, wearing a neat button-down and carrying a stack of folders. Sorry to barge in, Callum said, scanning the tense scene. Figured we should talk. He offered a polite nod to the kids. Hey, guys. Amelia and Lucas mumbled greetings, then retreated to their rooms, leaving the half-eaten toast on the plates. A hollow silence replaced their presence. Callum stepped closer to Arden. That bad, huh? Arden let out a slow exhale. They're siding with Liliana, or at least they're confused enough not to trust me. Dorian's made himself into some kind of hero figure. Callum's expression darkened. That's exactly what we need to counter. Look, you might want to consider protecting your assets before Liliana and Dorian pull something big. They're not messing around. Arden nodded, recalling the heated words from last night. I've been thinking the same, but I need time and probably legal help. I'm not sure Liliana understands the can of worms she's opened by letting Dorian manipulate her. Callum opened one of the folders. I made a few discreet calls. We've got a strong contact in Boston who can help set up a legal structure like a trust for your share of Blackwood security. It'll make it harder for them to seize control. Arden eyed the folder's contents. Charts, documents, names of financial specialists. Thank you, he murmured, flipping through. I guess I'll need all of this. With the kids practically idolizing Dorian, I have to act fast. Callum clapped him on the shoulder. We'll do this step by step, boss. Don't lose hope. Arden forced a faint smile. Step by step, right? But behind the words, a heavy weight pressed on his heart. He peered down the hallway where Amelia and Lucas had disappeared, longing to reach them. If only he could rewind the clock and balance his time better, he might have been the dad they needed, not the distant figure Dorian replaced. But there was no going back. Instead, he turned to Callum with fresh resolve. Let's get started. We can't let Dorian walk all over us. The two men headed to the living room, papers in hand. The morning sun was a pale glow against the storm-soaked windows, as though still uncertain whether to break through. Much like Arden's family, the day hovered in a fragile balance, one shift away from either clarity or deeper darkness. By mid-afternoon, the skies had cleared to a crisp blue, as if nature had decided to grant a reprieve from the previous night's turbulence. The living room table at Arden's house was strewn with legal documents, manila envelopes, and spiral-bound folders. A faint aroma of coffee drifted from the kitchen, where Amelia had prepared a pot before heading out with Lucas. They offered no details about where they were going, just a quick mention that Mom wanted them out of the house for some errands. Seated across from Arden was Madeline Shore, a poised attorney in her early 30s with dark hair pinned back in a tight bun. She wore a subtle gray suit that exuded professionalism and a certain quiet confidence. So, Mr. Blackwood, she began, flipping open a file. Callum has briefed me on your situation. You want to secure the bulk of Blackwood Securities' assets in a trust, correct? Arden, leaning forward, elbows braced on his knees, nodded grimly. Yes, I'm not trying to freeze Liliana out of everything, but I need to protect the company. Let's just say she's making decisions under someone else's influence. If she and Dorian Hayes push for a divorce settlement, they might go after BSEC. Madeline tapped her pen against the folder. We can establish what's called an irrevocable trust. You'd transfer your ownership shares into that entity, which removes them from your personal estate. Liliana can't claim them in a divorce if everything is done properly. Arden glanced at Callum, who stood nearby, arms folded. Then he focused on Madeline again. What does that process look like? How fast can we do it? She offered a confident smile. We can draft the paperwork in a couple of days. Once you sign, it'll take effect almost immediately. But I'll be honest, we have to be careful about timing. If Liliana's lawyers claim you did this to defraud her, they could contest it in court. Understood, Arden said. But from my perspective, it's the only way. Dorian's got her convinced I've abandoned the family, which is ridiculous. Next thing I know, I'll lose everything I built. Callum set a hand on Arden's shoulder. We'll handle it. Just be sure to keep a low profile while Madeline sorts out the legalities. A thoughtful expression crossed Madeline's face. Also, consider the children. Do you want them listed as beneficiaries in the trust? Arden hesitated, thinking of Amelia and Lucas. They had become distant, but they were still his kids. Yes, he said firmly. They deserve a future, even if right now they're confused. Madeline jotted notes. All right, we'll include them as future beneficiaries. That ensures they get support for education or emergencies, regardless of how the divorce shakes out. He felt a flicker of relief. Thank you. Madeline closed the folder. I'll get started immediately. Let's plan to meet again in 2 days for signatures. She rose, extending her hand, and Arden shook it. I appreciate your help. As Madeline headed out, Callum followed to see her off, leaving Arden alone in the living room. The hush of the empty house pressed in on him. He pictured Liliana's face from the night before, cold, resolute, vowing to do things the hard way. The memory sent an uneasy chill along his spine. Moments later, Callum returned. "She seems solid," he said, nodding toward the door. "Yeah," Arden agreed. "With any luck, we'll have the trust in place before Liliana or Dorian can do more damage." Callum settled onto a nearby armchair. "What about the kids? They don't trust you right now. Maybe you should talk to them. Explain that trust is for them, too." Arden's shoulders slumped. "They won't listen, especially if Liliana's feeding them a narrative that I only care about money. And Dorian's so good at making me look like the neglectful father." He paused, recalling the look on Lucas's face that morning, full of a teenager's half-formed accusations and heartbreak. "I want to tell them, but I'm afraid it'll push them further away." Callum rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Well, do it gently. Maybe tell them you're just safeguarding things until everyone figures out what they really want. Show them you're not out to punish their mom." Arden nodded wearily. "I'll try. But right now, Liliana's blindsided me so hard I feel like every step I take is on shaky ground." They sat in silence for a minute, the soft ticking of a wall clock marking the quiet. In the distance, a car door slammed. Arden frowned, standing to peer out the window. It was a mail carrier dropping off a package at the curb. He exhaled, nerves on edge. Callum checked his phone, eyebrows knitting. "I hate to bring more tension, but I got a text from one of the guys at the BSEC office. Seems Dorian was snooping around your personal files earlier today, something about verifying your assets. He claimed it was for an upcoming investment plan." Arden's jaw tightened. "It's never ending, is it?" "Afraid not, boss." He sank back down, pinching the bridge of his nose. Every hour brought a new layer to the betrayal. Yet for all the frustration and heartbreak, a steely determination began to form in his gut. If Liliana was dead set on ripping apart their marriage under Dorian's guidance, Arden would not be caught unprepared. "Fine," he said, exhaling slowly. "Let Dorian snoop. He won't find anything soon, to be mine, because it'll all be under the trust." Callum's mouth quirked in a half-grin. "There's the Arden I know." Before either could continue, Amelia and Lucas entered, each carrying shopping bags. They paused, clearly surprised to see the living room occupied by the two men and a spread of documents. Amelia's eyebrows rose. "What's all this?" she asked carefully. Arden exchanged a quick glance with Callum. "Just handling some company paperwork, sweetheart." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "For the divorce?" he asked, voice tinged with teenage indignation. Arden opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure how to phrase the truth. Finally, he chose a gentler path. "It's more about securing the business for the family no matter what happens. It's not to hurt your mother." Amelia's expression softened, but only slightly. "Well, Mom thinks you're trying to freeze her out." Callum decided to step in. "Your dad's just making sure nobody gets to exploit his hard work. That includes unscrupulous people. He wants you two taken care of, trust me." Lucas huffed. "We'll see. Doesn't feel like we're part of this decision." Arden watched them retreat upstairs, bags rustling. A hollow ache settled in his chest once again. He hoped that one day, when the dust settled, they would understand he did all of this for them too. For now, though, the trust was in motion, and with each pen stroke and filed document, Arden took a step toward safeguarding what little stability remained in the storm that was his unraveling life. For the first time in weeks, the skies over Boston shone clear and bright, giving way to a crisp evening. Arden Blackwood adjusted the collar of his tailored suit as he stepped out of his car in front of the Langford estate, a sprawling venue famous for hosting the city's most exclusive charity events. Shadows of manicured hedges stretched across a circular driveway where uniformed valets scrambled to receive gleaming luxury cars. Somewhere inside this opulent mansion, Liliana and Dorian were putting on their usual polished act. The mere thought ignited a low burn of tension behind Arden's ribs. Yet here he was, determined to show he wasn't about to cede public ground. If his wife and Dorian wanted to flaunt their new alliance, Arden would not skulk in the shadows. He strode up the marble steps, passing through a set of gilded double doors into the grand foyer. Crystal chandeliers cast shards of warm light across polished floors. A quick glance told him the guest list was formidable. He recognized CEOs, philanthropists, and a smattering of local celebrities. The air smelled of perfume, cologne, and old money. Mr. Blackwood, what a surprise. A hostess in a sleek black dress offered him a practiced smile. Welcome to the annual Heritage Preservation Gala. Arden returned a polite nod. Thank you. Then he moved past her into the main hall. Tables draped in ivory linen showcased exquisite floral arrangements, while waiters glided gracefully, offering canapes and champagne. He spotted Amelia and Lucas across the room. The twins, both 17, were dressed elegantly. Lucas in a slim-cut blazer, Amelia in a muted teal gown. They stood close to Liliana, who dazzled in an off-shoulder burgundy dress. At her side, Dorian Hayes wore a smug half-smile, perfectly coiffed hair, and a midnight blue tux that probably cost more than some cars. They looked like a picture-perfect group, the kind that would show up in Boston social pages. As he approached, he overheard Dorian's smooth voice, "And with the right investment portfolio, our dear Liliana can secure a bright future for the whole family." The statement churned in Arden's stomach. He forced composure. "Family's an interesting word, Dorian," he said, stepping into the circle. "I can't help noticing you use it quite freely lately." Dorian turned, eyebrows lifting as though caught off guard. "Arden, didn't expect you here." He recovered swiftly, offering a grin laced with condescension. "But I'm glad you could make it." Liliana's gaze flicked to Arden, her expression unreadable. Amelia and Lucas glanced away as if they'd rather avoid the tension gathering in the space between them. Before anyone could reply, a commanding voice interrupted, "Ah, the Blackwoods and Mr. Hayes, all in one place." Judge Alistair Rowland approached, regal in a tailored suit, a small glass of whiskey in hand. His eyes gleamed with thinly veiled interest. "I was just telling a colleague how divorces can be, financially advantageous for certain parties." Arden's jaw tightened. "Judge Rowland, good to see you outside a courtroom." Rowland offered a polite chuckle. "Indeed. Let's just say I'm always open to new developments." He turned to Liliana. "Your counsel, should you proceed with the divorce, is top-notch. From what I hear, it's likely you could secure a majority stake if things are—" His gaze flickered to Arden. "Handled properly." Arden felt the heat rise in his chest. He refused to snap in front of so many onlookers. "That's quite an assumption, Judge. I'm not sure every situation can be reduced to financial metrics." Liliana's voice slid in, calm and cold. "What else is there, Arden? You've made it clear your work is your top priority." He searched her face, looking for a trace of the woman he once knew. But she wore an expression of practiced detachment, her posture perfectly poised as though any sign of doubt might crack the flawless veneer. Sensing the tension, Amelia touched her mother's arm. "Maybe we should get some air," she ventured quietly. Lucas nodded, sparing Arden a fleeting glance that mingled confusion and concern. The siblings led Liliana away, weaving through clusters of elegantly dressed patrons. Dorian hesitated as if to follow, but Judge Rowland caught his elbow, steering him aside with a quiet murmur that Arden couldn't make out. Exhaling, Arden pivoted toward the nearest patio door. He stepped outside onto a stone terrace lined with potted lemon trees. A gentle breeze off the nearby river cooled the flush in his cheeks. Twinkling string lights dangled overhead, giving the evening air a faint, magical quality that belied the messy reality churning beneath. "Arden?" called a voice. He turned to see Callum Delacroix, dressed more simply than the rest, but still blending well enough to pass as a well-heeled guest. "I got in with a last-minute ticket," Callum added, stepping over. "Couldn't let you face this circus alone." Arden offered a terse nod. "Thanks. You're seeing how comfortable Dorian is in these circles. He's got Liliana fully convinced she can win big. And he's peddling the same story to the kids." Callum glanced around, then lowered his voice. "We need evidence of Dorian's real motives. I've been digging. There's chatter about a connection to the Fairfax family, something about a personal grudge against you. But I have no details yet." "Fairfax?" Arden repeated, frowning. "I recall the name vaguely, something from my military days, but we're missing pieces." Callum shrugged, scanning the door to ensure no one was listening. We'll keep digging. Meanwhile, hold your ground. Let them see you won't be intimidated." Arden's gaze flicked back inside, where the silhouettes of Liliana, Dorian, and Judge Rowland mingled among the city's elite. "I'm not backing down," he said quietly. "Even if they come at me with every legal trick in the book." Callum squeezed Arden's shoulder. "Good, because I have a feeling they will." A faint swirl of music drifted from within violins playing a jaunty waltz. The breeze carried the sweet scent of night-blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the bitterness roiling in Arden's chest. For better or worse, the lines of battle had been drawn. And if Liliana and Dorian thought he would simply roll over, they were about to learn otherwise. 2 days after the gala, Arden found himself pacing the polished floors of Blackwood Security's main lobby. It was a sleek, modern space lined with glass walls and minimalist furniture, the kind of design that reflected his taste for clean efficiency. Yet behind the crisp professionalism lay a brewing storm. Callum Delacroix jogged up from a hallway. "He's in your office," he muttered, shaking his head. "Showed up unannounced." Arden's jaw flexed. He knew exactly who he was. Squaring his shoulders, he strode down the corridor and pushed open the door to his private office. There stood Dorian Hayes, calmly examining a framed photograph on Arden's desk, an old snapshot of Arden holding Amelia and Lucas when they were small. Dorian turned around, lips curving in an almost sympathetic smile. "Family is everything, right?" he said, gesturing at the photo. Arden forced a neutral expression. "I'm surprised to see you here. Last I checked, you handle Liliana's finances." "Liliana's finances are tied to yours," Dorian countered, strolling casually around the office. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm offering a proposition to restructure Blackwood Security, open it to new shareholders, expand into broader markets. With the right capital injection, BSEC could triple in value." Arden stared him down. "I'm not interested." Dorian arched an eyebrow. "You'd really let sentiment blind you to a lucrative opportunity? I'd have thought you were more pragmatic." Callum hovered near the doorway, tension etched across his features. Arden made a subtle motion for him to stay put, no need for an altercation. Not yet, anyway. "Here's the thing," Arden said, sliding behind his desk. "BSEC is mine. I built it from scratch. I know exactly how I want it run, and I'm not about to hand control over to outside investors." Dorian leaned against a chair, crossing his arms. "You built it, sure. But did you ever consider what Liliana sacrificed along the way? Her time, her youth, her dreams of a certain lifestyle?" An ember of anger flared in Arden's chest. He locked eyes with Dorian. "I know what Liliana's done, and I'm also aware of her new ambitions, ones you've happily encouraged." A faint smirk tugged at Dorian's mouth. "You can paint me as the villain if you like, but let's be real. You neglected her, poured your soul into this firm. Now we want to help BSEC flourish. It's a win-win if you stop being so obstinate." Callum cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwood has always been open to growth, but not at the cost of losing autonomy. This sudden push for outside capital feels rushed." Dorian's gaze flicked to Callum. "I see, the loyal lieutenant. So you're advising your boss to stand still while the industry evolves?" Arden's frustration spiked. He forced himself to remain calm, recalling Madeline Shore's counsel about not tipping his hand. "If you have actual paperwork or a business plan, show it to my attorney," he said flatly. "Otherwise, this conversation is over." Dorian exhaled in a theatrical sigh. "You're stubborn, Arden. I'll give you that." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Arden and Callum could hear. "But be warned, Liliana is prepared to push forward with the divorce. If you continue blocking her path to a fair settlement, we'll see you in court, and BSEC might not remain under your control." Arden clenched his fists beneath the desk, refusing to show how the threat rattled him. "We'll see who ends up in control, Dorian." For a moment, their gazes locked, an unspoken challenge sparking between them. Then Dorian straightened his jacket, cast one last glance at the old family photo, and strode out. He offered a curt nod at Callum on his way. When he was gone, Arden let out a slow breath, tension radiating through his shoulders. That man is beyond shameless. "Agreed," Callum replied quietly. "He's definitely got a plan, and I've got more info on that Fairfax's lead. Might be relevant to why he's so determined to sabotage you. Arden's brow furrowed. Go on. Callum glanced at the door to ensure no eavesdroppers. I did some digging in public records. The Fairfax family lost a son in a classified military op years back. Rumor is, they blamed someone from the Special Forces for a wrong call. I can't confirm names, but it points suspiciously close to your old unit. An uneasy stir roiled in Arden's stomach. I was involved in a few hush-hush missions, but the details are sealed. If that's connected, then Dorian is using Liliana's divorce as a front for something bigger. Callum sighed. If the Fairfaxes want revenge, employing Dorian to cripple you financially or otherwise would make sense. Arden rubbed his temples. I have to figure out exactly what happened back then, because if Dorian's working for them, this isn't just about Liliana's settlement, it's a full-blown vendetta. He glanced around his office, once a sanctuary of order and achievement, now overshadowed by a looming threat. Keep monitoring him, Arden said firmly, turning to Callum. Track every move he makes inside this company. If he tries to access confidential info or sabotage deals, I want to know. Callum nodded, determination sparking in his eyes. You got it, boss. As Arden stared at the door Dorian had exited, a chill of foreboding crept in. Time was slipping away, and Dorian's next move could devastate both the firm and Arden's personal life. The only way forward, he realized, was to dig into the secrets of his past and outmaneuver an enemy who seemed to have every advantage. Sunlight blazed through the tall windows of Arden's study at home, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the still air. While Liliana and the twins were out, who knew where Arden had seized the opportunity to sift through old storage boxes in the attic? He needed answers about the Fairfax family, answers that might be buried in his memories or in the records from his Special Forces days. He sat at a small wooden desk, piles of yellowed documents spread out in front of him. Old letters from commanding officers, commendation certificates, and redacted mission reports. Most were coded references to places and incidents that the public never knew about. The hush of the house pressed on him as he reread fragments of a life he'd left behind. A certain line in a mission summary caught his eye. Operation Cedarlight infiltration successful, resulting casualties. 2 friendly, 5 hostile. He traced a fingertip over the typed text. A memory stirred the relentless heat of a desert sun, the roar of helicopter blades, the stench of fear, and the guilt that had lodged in his chest ever since that day. He recalled the face of a CIA operative embedded with Arden's team, young, eager, carrying the last name Fairfax. The operation had turned sideways when an ambush caught them off guard. Arden's split-second decisions had saved most of his squad, but led to the operative's fatal injury. Through the haze of adrenaline, he remembered trying to stop the bleeding, the operative's last words lost in the din of gunfire. The official debrief labeled it an unavoidable casualty, a tragic cost of war. But for a powerful family like the Fairfaxes, blame didn't simply vanish with a stamp of mission success. A soft knock pulled him from his reverie. He slid the file beneath some innocuous documents as Callum Delacroix stepped into the study. "Hey," Callum greeted in a hushed tone. "I came as soon as you texted." Arden exhaled. "So, it's true. The Fairfax connection. They had a son in my unit. He died on my watch. They must hold me responsible." Callum's jaw tightened. "Damn, that means Dorian could be carrying out a vendetta, ruining your family life, taking down BSEC, all to avenge the Fairfaxes." Arden rubbed a hand across his mouth. "I should have realized sooner. I tried to move on from those missions, bury the guilt, but it never truly goes away. If the Fairfaxes want payback, it explains Dorian's obsession with me. And Liliana. She doesn't realize she's a pawn in some twisted plan." Callum pulled up a chair. "So what's next?" Arden gathered the file, slipping it into a secure folder. "I won't let them destroy what I've built, or what's left of my family, but I need proof that Dorian's connected to them. Without it, Liliana will keep believing his lies." Callum nodded. "If we can find a paper trail emails, transactions that link him directly to the Fairfaxes, we can blow his cover wide open." Arden stood, crossing to the window. Outside, sunlight bathed the suburban street. A pair of joggers passed by, oblivious to the turmoil inside the Blackwood home. Madeline Shore has set up the trust, he said, referencing the legal arrangement that would safeguard BSEC. But that only prevents him from seizing the company's assets. It doesn't stop him from turning my kids against me or pushing Liliana to escalate the divorce. Callum leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We need a plan to gather evidence discreetly. The last thing we want is for Dorian to suspect we're onto his bigger motive. A flicker of memory passed through Arden Dorian's smug grin at the gala, Judge Rowland's subtle nod of approval. He's well connected, likely has a network that extends beyond Liliana's circle. We'll have to outthink him, not just outfight him. I'm done being blindsided. Callum offered a supportive smirk. Finally, the old Arden, the one who used to adapt on the fly in high-stakes missions. A moment's silence settled as Arden let the weight of the past rest on his shoulders. He closed his eyes, recalling the day he left the military. He'd vowed never to bring that life back into his civilian world. Yet here he was, forced to confront the ghost he'd tried to bury. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Amelia and Lucas, he murmured. They may resent me now, but they're still my children, and I won't see them manipulated by a man on a revenge quest. Callum rose, placing a reassuring hand on Arden's arm. We've got this. I'll keep looking into Dorian's finances and affiliations. You stay vigilant with Liliana and the kids. Just then, the sound of a car door slamming reached them from outside. Arden peered through the window, Liliana's sedan, and stepping out of the passenger side was Amelia, wearing a strained expression. Callum stepped back. I'll head out the back way, he whispered. Keep me posted. As he slipped away, Arden felt his heart clench. The lines of loyalty and trust in his household had become painfully blurred. But now he knew the deeper reason behind Dorian's manipulations. An old blood debt, fueled by a family's rage over a lost son. Steeling himself, Arden carefully tucked the operation file into a locked drawer. He had no desire for Liliana or the kids to see these documents, not until he fully understood how to use them. If the Fairfaxes had launched a campaign of vengeance, he planned to turn their own secrecy against them. Stepping out into the hall, he braced for the next round of conflict that was sure to follow. Every footstep felt heavy, yet with each stride his resolve solidified. He was done retreating. And if Dorian wanted a fight, Arden would bring all the skill and cunning he'd honed in the field this time to protect the people he loved most. Later that week, a humid summer dusk settled over the Blackwood residence. Cicadas buzzed in the thick air, and the sky glowed with purple and orange hues. Inside the house, however, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Arden stood in the hallway, listening to hushed but urgent voices emanating from the living room. He edged closer, his pulse jumping when he recognized Dorian's tone smooth, persuasive. Liliana was there too, speaking rapidly, while Amelia and Lucas hovered nearby. I know it's short notice, Liliana was saying, but this is an incredible opportunity. We'll travel to Europe for a month or two, check out potential business ventures. Dorian has connections to a property in Spain, and Amelia's voice was uncertain. But Mom, what about school? Senior year starts soon. Dorian let out a light chuckle. Don't worry, dear. Your mother and I can arrange transfers, tutors, anything you need. Think of this as the adventure of a lifetime. Arden stepped into the living room, heart pounding. Liliana stood near the sofa, arms crossed tightly, while Dorian lounged in an armchair, legs casually crossed. Amelia sat on the edge of the couch, biting her lip, and Lucas leaned against the wall, hands jammed in his pockets. What's this talk about Europe? Arden demanded, keeping his voice level despite the surge of anger. Liliana fixed him with a cold stare. It's a plan for after the divorce. I want the kids to experience a broader world, away from all this hostility. Dorian offered a lazy smile. We'd planned to tell you eventually, but since you're here, you're planning to uproot them entirely? Arden interrupted, stepping forward. Amelia, Lucas, you both realize you're being swept into a move that benefits Dorian's ambitions, not yours, right? Lucas shrugged, gaze averted. Mom says it could be good for us, and I'm tired of all the tension here. Amelia's expression was conflicted, but she nodded in hesitant agreement. It's not like we're signing anything permanent, Dad. It's just a chance to get away from the constant fighting. Arden's chest squeezed with a painful mix of betrayal and sorrow. What fighting? I'm not the one pushing a sudden relocation overseas. That's them, trying to drag you into something behind my back." Liliana set her jaw. "You've had your chance to keep this family together, Arden. You chose your company. Now it's our turn to choose what's best for the kids." A swell of frustration rose in him. He recalled the conversation with Callum and the hidden motive behind Dorian's involvement. They're setting up a dream life in Europe, but it's all about seizing BSEC or fulfilling some twisted revenge. He inhaled sharply. "Amelia, Lucas, can we talk privately for a minute?" he asked, voice taut. Dorian tisked softly. "No need to drag them away. We're all adults here." Arden ignored him, beckoning the twins into the adjacent hallway. Reluctantly, they followed, leaving Liliana and Dorian glancing after them with narrowed eyes. Once alone, Arden lowered his voice. "Kids, I understand you feel caught in the middle, but running off to Europe with Dorian, he has his own agenda. He's not just some kind philanthropist." Lucas shot him a guarded look. "Maybe he does, but he's been upfront with us. He's the one giving us real options, not half answers." Arden's frustration churned. "Because I've been trying to shield you from the uglier details. Dorian is dangerous. He's got connections that could hurt this family more than you realize." Amelia folded her arms, eyes glistening with confusion. "We keep hearing you talk about how dangerous Dorian is, but you never show us proof. All we see is a guy who's helped Mom figure out financial stuff and offered us opportunities. Opportunities that separate you from me," Arden snapped, then softened his tone, seeing Amelia flinch. "Look, just trust me. Don't sign anything. Don't commit to anything until you've heard everything." Lucas opened his mouth as though to argue, but a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Finally, he muttered, "We'll think about it, Dad." Arden let out a shaky breath, nodding. "That's all I ask." They returned to the living room where Dorian and Liliana stood close, murmuring in low voices. A hush fell as soon as Arden and the twins approached. Liliana pressed her lips together, then spoke in a measured tone. "We're planning a short trip next week to meet some potential partners in Barcelona. If the kids like what they see, we'll consider extending our stay." Dorian dipped his chin, glancing at the twins. "Of course, you're free to decide as you wish, but I'd be delighted to help you explore new horizons." Arden resisted the urge to challenge him outright. Instead, he said, "Right. Well, the kids will let you know if they want to go." A tense silence stretched. Then Liliana cleared her throat. "In that case, let's all try to stay civil until final decisions are made. It's getting late." Dorian checked his watch and gave a charming smile to Amelia and Lucas. "We'll talk soon. And don't forget I've got those scholarship leads for you both." With that, he bid them good night, heading out the door alongside Liliana. When the sound of her car engine faded, the house felt hollow, as though their departure had sucked the air from every corner. Amelia looked at Arden, uncertainty etched across her features. "Dad, we really don't know what to believe anymore." Lucas nodded, exhaling in a mix of frustration and sadness. We need a break from all this conflict." Arden's heart twisted. He reached out, but neither twin moved closer. "I understand," he murmured. "But remember, no matter how all of this looks, I'm fighting for your future, too." They stared at him for a moment longer before heading upstairs together, leaving Arden alone with the pulsing ache of a divided family. He rubbed his temples, thinking of Dorian's whispered schemes, the Fairfax vendetta, and the steps needed to expose it all. Outside, cicadas droned louder, as if lamenting the quiet turmoil inside the Blackwood household. Arden had never imagined he'd be grappling with betrayal on so many fronts: his marriage, his kids, his past. Yet he stood resolute, determined to peel back the layers of Dorian's plan. Because behind that polished smile and golden promises, Arden sensed the slow coil of a trap, and he refused to let his family be ensnared without a fight. Arden Blackwood slipped his car into an empty space near the Swanridge Hotel's valet area, the glow of city lights tracing the sleek contours of passing vehicles. He was late again. Crisp autumn air bristled against his suit jacket as he jogged across the marble foyer. Tonight marked his 45th birthday, but the anticipation he'd once had for such milestones felt strangely absent. He found the ballroom entrance flanked by tall gold pillars and a sumptuous floral display. The hum of chatter and soft violin music drifted out each time the doors swung open. Pausing to compose himself, he drew a steadying breath. This was supposed to be a celebration, but the call he'd received earlier that Liliana had planned something special left a hollow pit in his stomach. Slipping inside, he wove through clusters of well-dressed guests, sipping champagne and nibbling on hors d'oeuvre. The space overflowed with glittering chandeliers, polished parquet floors, and a multi-tiered cake set on a raised platform. He spotted Amelia and Lucas near the edge of the crowd, both dressed formally. Neither looked thrilled. They seemed relieved to catch sight of him. "Dad," Amelia whispered urgently, stepping closer. Her teal evening gown rustled against her ankles. "We've been trying to text you. Where have you been?" "Stuck at the office." Arden's gut twisted at the anxious flicker in her eyes. "What's going on? You both seem on edge." Before they could answer, the room's spotlight shifted to a large round table at the center, where Liliana Blackwood stood with a microphone. Her burgundy satin dress gleamed under the stage lights. Just behind her hovered Dorian Hayes, a self-assured half-smile on his lips. Judge Alistair Rowland, sporting a tailored tuxedo, lingered to one side. Liliana's voice projected smoothly through the speakers. "Welcome, everyone, to Arden Blackwood's birthday celebration. We appreciate you joining us on this special night." A polite ripple of applause followed. Arden edged closer, dread curling low in his stomach. He caught the hint of tension in Liliana's tone. It wasn't the loving, playful banter of a wife praising her husband. It was something else. Liliana locked eyes with him across the sea of onlookers. "Arden," she said, a crisp edge in her voice, "why don't you come up here? There's something we need to address. Publicly." A hush fell, people shifting to watch. Amelia gripped her father's arm, looking distressed. Lucas stared at the floor, lips pressed tight. With forced composure, Arden navigated the crowd and mounted the small stage, his face a calm mask despite the tremor in his gut. Liliana extended a thick envelope to him. Her posture was poised, face expressionless. "Happy birthday," she announced into the microphone, then clicked it off. Tucking the device aside, she spoke directly to him, voice low but audible to everyone nearby. "I'm filing for divorce, Arden." The hush became stunned silence. Even the violinists halted mid-note. Alistair Rowland offered a perfunctory nod, stepping forward just enough to confirm, "I can expedite proceedings if that's your wish, Liliana." A murmur rippled through the guests. Arden's pulse thundered in his ears. He spotted Dorian behind Liliana, champagne glass in hand, wearing a smug grin. His eyes, however, burned with a predatory gleam. Liliana continued, tone icy, "You've prioritized your company over this family for too long. I'm tired of watching everything revolve around Blackwood security while our marriage crumbles." A single camera flash popped from someone's phone, capturing the stunned expression on Arden's face. The room felt both claustrophobic and painfully exposed. "Liliana," he rasped, half in shock. You really want to do this? Here, tonight?" She lifted her chin. "You gave me no choice. You were never around. And now we're done pretending." Dorian stepped forward, raising his glass. "We can settle this quickly," he said, voice dripping with feigned graciousness. "No point dragging everyone through drama." Arden glanced at his children, heartsick at the sight of them standing silently off stage. Amelia's gaze darted away while Lucas merely stared at the floor. "Kids," he began, wanting them to speak, to refute this spectacle. But they remained mute, eyes filled with conflict. Amelia fiddled with the fabric of her gown. Lucas looked cornered. Arden swallowed, the betrayal and heartbreak swirling into a single knot in his throat. Judge Rowland cleared his throat. "If Mr. Blackwood is willing to sign, we can finalize the paperwork quickly." The weight of that envelope in Arden's hands felt like a lead anchor. He flipped through the top page, glimpsing the cold legal jargon. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Betrayal flared into quiet resolve. "No," he said softly, then lifted his voice so it carried across the stunned audience. "I'm not signing anything tonight." His gaze locked onto Liliana's. "Not here. Not like this." Dorian's smirk faltered. Liliana's eyes flashed in anger. "This is the best course for all of us," she insisted, her tone taut. "If you won't sign willingly." Arden shook his head, stepping back. "I said no." He turned on his heel, voice laced with hurt. "And whatever you're planning, it won't go as you expect." He walked off the stage, shoulders stiff, ignoring the rush of whispers. The parted crowd stared, some in shock, others in curiosity. Amelia and Lucas exchanged uncertain glances. Liliana said nothing more, and Dorian's arrogant composure cracked just a shade. Out in the corridor, Arden pulled his phone and dialed quickly. The line clicked, and a familiar voice answered. "Callum," Arden said, heart pounding. "We're moving forward. Start the plan." He hung up before his friend could respond, stepping into the cool evening air that stung his flushed cheeks. His entire life had just been exposed in front of half of Boston's elite, but he refused to be humiliated into submission. Whatever Liliana and Dorian thought they had orchestrated tonight was only the beginning. He'd make sure of that. That same night, a pale moonlight cast ghostly reflections along the windows of Dorian Hayes's upscale townhouse. The clock neared midnight when the doorbell's echo jolted him from a simmering argument with Liliana. "Who in the world?" Dorian muttered, heading for the foyer. He swung open the door to find a courier with a small padded envelope. "Delivery from Mr. Dorian Hayes," the courier said, verifying the name before handing it over. Dorian signed hastily. The moment he shut the door, Liliana stepped forward, arms folded protectively over her blouse. "What is it now?" she asked, her earlier anger overshadowed by curiosity. Dorian tore open the envelope, revealing a crisp set of legal documents. A paper note attached on top read in elegant script, "Compliments of Madeline Shore, ESQ." Liliana's face paled. "Madeline Shore, Arden's lawyer?" Dorian's brow furrowed as he flipped through. Each page detailed a meticulously crafted, irrevocable trust securing a majority stake of Blackwood Securities' assets. Summaries indicated that Arden no longer personally owned many of the resources Liliana had expected to claim in a divorce. Instead, they belonged to the trust, with carefully arranged beneficiaries and layers of protection. He let out a sharp expletive. "That bastard set this up to keep us from touching his assets." Liliana snatched the papers, scanning them frantically. Her eyes widened. "All the properties, the major accounts, transferred into this trust? We can't claim anything from it?" The edges of her voice shook. She'd banked on securing a substantial portion of BSEC in the divorce. Now, it felt as though the rug had been pulled from under her. Dorian flung the envelope onto a nearby coffee table, sending a vase rattling. "He must have been planning this for months. We can challenge it in court, but it won't be easy." Liliana bristled, stepping away from Dorian. "You told me I'd be safe, that we'd get a fair settlement enough to ensure Amelia and Lucas never worry about money." Dorian paced the living room, jaw tight. "I didn't think Arden had the foresight to lock everything up. Clearly, I underestimated him." She pinched the bridge of her nose, frustration flooding her. "This changes everything. How am I supposed to support the kids if he's squirreled away the assets?" A flicker of anger crossed Dorian's features. "We'll figure something out. My advice? Don't let him see you rattled. We can still pressure him, especially if we leverage the children's loyalty." Liliana's gaze flicked to a framed photo of Amelia and Lucas on the mantel. "They're torn," she said quietly. "Amelia's uncertain. Lucas is practically resentful of his father. But if they find out about this trust, if they think Arden is just safeguarding their future..." Her words trailed off, the realization sinking in. Arden's move was brilliant, setting him up as the protector of the kids' financial well-being while casting suspicion on Dorian's motives. Dorian scowled. "Don't worry about that. We'll feed them the angle that Arden's just protecting himself. They already saw how he walked out of that party, refusing to even discuss a settlement." Liliana swallowed hard. The memory of that humiliating moment before Boston's elite still burned in her mind. "So what do we do now?" He exhaled, controlling his temper. "First, we regroup. I'll contact some associates who might help challenge this trust's legitimacy. If that fails, we can still fight for alimony or other concessions. The kids remain our trump card for now." She turned her back to him, running a hand through her hair. You said you had a plan for everything, and yet here we are, blindsided. Dorian ground his teeth. Sometimes you lose a round, he admitted grudgingly, but the game's not over. They glared at each other in a tense stalemate, the newly arrived document strewn across the table like a silent declaration of Arden's cunning. The realization dawned that they'd underestimated him, and now their meticulously crafted scheme to secure BSX's wealth stood on shaky ground. Liliana glanced at the clock. Past midnight, but neither she nor Dorian felt any inclination to rest. "Fine," she said at last, voice firm. "If Arden wants a war, we'll give it to him." Dorian's lips curled into a thin smile. That's the spirit. Despite her outward resolve, Liliana felt a flicker of doubt. She recalled the look in Arden's eyes at the birthday party confusion, betrayal, and a steely determination. Part of her hated how easily she'd fallen in with Dorian's manipulations. Another part clung to the hope that she could still outmaneuver her husband. But for tonight, all she could do was stare at the trust paperwork, glaring proof that Arden Blackwood was not the naive, work-obsessed pushover she'd taken him for. He had played a ruthless card, and the consequences of his move had only begun to unfold. The next morning, pale sunlight streamed into Arden's home office, highlighting the faint circles under his eyes. After the explosive events of the previous night, he'd slept poorly, mind churning with all that lay ahead. He had just wrapped a call with Madeline Shore, who confirmed Dorian and Liliana now understood the full extent of the trust arrangement. A soft knock broke his concentration. He looked up to see Liliana standing in the doorway, wearing a stylish blazer and jeans, a contrast from her usual glamorous attire. He rose, motioning her inside. "Didn't expect you so soon." She closed the door quietly behind her, gaze sweeping the neatly arranged desk. "I wanted to talk about everything." Her voice was restrained, a tension brimming beneath the surface. "We can't let this spiral into an all-out war. The kids are already stressed enough." Arden eased into his chair, crossing his arms. "I've been hoping to avoid a war from day one. But you forced my hand when you ambushed me at the birthday party." She flinched at the reminder. "That wasn't entirely my plan," she said softly, then forced an exhale. "Look, can we negotiate? Something that doesn't leave me empty-handed and doesn't let you hide all assets behind a trust?" His pulse quickened. For a moment he glimpsed the Liliana he'd once loved, practical, direct, not the cold figure who'd blindsided him. But trust was in short supply now. He rubbed his temple. "The trust is non-negotiable. It's there to protect what I built and to ensure Amelia and Lucas have a secure future. I'd be open to a fair settlement for you, but that's it." She studied him, frustration flashing in her eyes. "You locked up nearly everything. I'm left with scraps." "Scraps?" His voice hardened. "The trust can provide for the kids. You know that. If you want a personal arrangement, I'll discuss that with my attorney. But don't expect me to hand you half my company, especially when Dorian is pulling your strings." Liliana bristled, lips thinning. "You think I'm a puppet? I have my own reasons for wanting out of this marriage, reasons that go beyond Dorian." Arden's gaze flicked to the framed family photo on a nearby shelf. "Then do it your way, Liliana. File for divorce without him meddling. Let's talk about a real compromise that ensures the kids' well-being. Otherwise, I can't trust your intentions." She hesitated, expression flickering with conflicting emotions. Memories of simpler times when they'd share coffee over corny jokes rose unbidden in her mind. But the rift between them now was vast. "You're making it sound so black and white. Real life is messy, Arden." He sighed. "Messy is an understatement, but I refuse to watch BSX become a pawn in some grand scheme." The silence stretched, brittle as old glass. Then Liliana cleared her throat. "If you won't budge on the trust, we'll just have to see what the court says. But I'm still trying to keep the kids from getting hurt." Arden's eyes narrowed. "How exactly are you planning to do that? By taking them on a spontaneous overseas trip with Dorian? Because that sure as hell doesn't sound safe." Liliana stiffened. "I know what I'm doing. Don't paint me as irresponsible." He pressed his palms onto the desk, leaning forward. "They're both 17, Liliana. Do you really want them caught in the middle of a cross-continental divorce fiasco?" This is more about hurting me or draining my resources. Her cheeks flushed, the subtle veneer cracking. Don't assume you know my motives, she snapped. But fine if you're so concerned. Prove you can provide for them better. Amelia and Lucas have their own minds, and they're losing faith in you. A taut stillness settled, each waiting for the other to yield. Finally, Liliana turned on her heel, heading to the door. She paused, glancing back over her shoulder. I came here hoping we could find common ground. I see you're as stubborn as ever. Arden exhaled, a pang of regret mingling with determination. We are where we are, Liliana. I won't let you or Dorian sabotage my life's work. If you're sincere about a fair arrangement, we can talk again. Otherwise, we'll settle this in court. Without another word, she left. The click of her heels receded down the hallway. Arden remained at his desk, heart pounding. For a fleeting second, he wondered if they might have approached this differently shared truths, bridged the gap. But the image of Dorian's smug face at the party, the divorce papers pressed into his hands, destroyed that daydream quickly. Just then, the phone buzzed. It was Callum. Boss, came his urgent tone. One of our contacts says Liliana's made inquiries about moving funds, possibly pulling from accounts we didn't lock down. Arden's stomach lurched. So she's doubling down. Seems like it. Word is, she's pressuring the kids to travel with her. Something about transferring money and finalizing legal steps abroad. He hung up, tension knotting his shoulders. There was only so much he could do to block Liliana financially without appearing malicious. Meanwhile, Dorian likely whispered promises of a new, glittering life to her and the kids. If they carried out these moves under foreign jurisdictions, the trust's protections could be circumvented in ways he might not anticipate. He inhaled, steeling himself, feeling. This was Liliana's dilemma. Cling to Dorian's illusions of grandeur or reach a compromise with Arden. Judging by the day's events, compromise wasn't on her agenda. He left the office to find Amelia and Lucas. They needed to know the score before Liliana manipulated them further. Yet as he ascended the stairs, a twist of unease gnawed at him. The question pressed relentlessly. Would they even believe him anymore? It was nearly dusk when Arden trudged into the living room. An unsettling hush met him. No faint music from Lucas's cello. No murmured conversation from Amelia's video calls. He flicked on a lamp, its warm glow revealing a pristine but strangely empty space. Amelia? Lucas? He called, heading upstairs. The bedrooms lay open, lights off. Both beds were neatly made, an eerie sign that someone had tidied up before leaving. A prickle of unease scampered along his spine. In Amelia's room, he spotted a note on the dresser. Heart pounding, he picked it up. The handwriting was neat, likely Amelia's. Mom said we need a break from all the fighting. We're going on a short vacation with her and Dorian. Not sure where exactly, but we'll be fine. Don't worry. We'll call when we can. A rush of dread washed over him. He reread the note, cursing under his breath. They'd left with Liliana and presumably Dorian without so much as a final discussion. He dialed Amelia's phone. No answer. Lucas's phone. Same result. Liliana's line went straight to voicemail. Anxiety flared into anger. They blindsided me again. Storming downstairs, he pulled out his own phone and called Callum Delacroix. The kids are gone, he said, voice taut. They left a note saying they're on vacation with Liliana and Dorian. No clue where. A soft curse from Callum's end. I suspected they'd try something soon. Let me ping the local airports. We have a few connections that can confirm if they booked flights. Arden paced the living room, eyes flicking to the drawn curtains as if expecting them to burst open with answers. Do it fast. They might already be airborne. Minutes later, Callum rang back, voice grim. I found a private charter manifest listing Liliana Blackwood and 2 minors flying to the Bahamas. The plane left an hour ago from a small airfield near the city. Arden's stomach lurched. Bahamas. That lines up with Dorian's rumored offshore accounts. He's probably using the kids as leverage to move assets or set up new accounts before the trust fully blocks everything. Sounds like it, Callum agreed. We can't let them vanish into some tropical stronghold. We need to act now. Arden's thoughts whirled. He remembered Liliana's veiled threats about taking the kids abroad. He'd dismissed it as a bluff. He never expected her to do it so abruptly. But with Dorian calling the shots, logic and caution were in short supply. "I'm booking a flight," he told Callum, grabbing his keys. "We have to get there before Dorian finalizes whatever scheme he's pulling. If the kids end up entangled in offshore deals, I lose all legal traction." "I'm with you," Callum replied. "Meet me at BSEC in half an hour. I'll gather gear and get in touch with a contact in the Bahamas." Hanging up, Arden hurried to pack a small bag. His mind buzzed with dire scenarios. Amelia and Lucas trapped in some lavish villa, coerced into signing documents or manipulated into adopting Dorian's last name, whatever unscrupulous trick he might conjure. They're still minors, but international waters blur many lines. He paused by a family photo in the hallway, the four of them at a cabin trip years ago, all smiling in the sunlight. The memory twisted his heart. Liliana had once shared genuine love and laughter with him. Now she spirited their children away, under the sway of an opportunistic liar. With a final glance around the empty house, he stepped out into the twilight, the sky tinted with the faint orange glow of city lights. The world felt suspended, each second precious. He had to reclaim control, ensure Dorian's plan failed, and more importantly, protect Amelia and Lucas from becoming pawns in an international tug-of-war. "Stay strong," he told himself, slipping into his SUV. "They're counting on you, even if they don't realize it right now." The drive to Blackwood Security's headquarters blurred in a haze of traffic lights and adrenaline. When he arrived, Callum was already waiting in front of the sleek glass building, 2 carry-on bags at his feet. The night air carried a hint of rain, reflecting off the glowing BSEC sign. Callum's grim nod spoke volumes. "Got us tickets on the next commercial flight. Leaves in 4 hours. A contact in Nassau can help once we land." Arden slung his bag over his shoulder, mind churning with questions. "We have no jurisdiction in the Bahamas. If they're staying in a private estate Callum cut in, we'll do what we can. Maybe local authorities or the FBI's field office if we can prove Dorian's involved in criminal activity." Arden thought of the trust documents, the hidden aims of the Fairfax family. None of it gave him direct leverage to call in an immediate rescue, but he had to try. "We can't let him slip through. The kids are still Americans, minors, and Liliana's a U.S. citizen. That has to count for something." Callum nodded, loading the bags into a waiting sedan. "They've only got a small head start. If we move fast, we can intercept them before they vanish into the tropics." Arden glanced at the city skyline. He felt the weight of his old instincts from his special ops days, stirring a relentless determination to protect those under his watch. "Let's go," he said quietly. Soon they were weaving through night traffic, heading for the airport. Darkness cloaked the highways, broken by occasional headlights and neon signs. A swirl of anticipation and dread thrummed in Arden's chest. He pictured Amelia's uncertain eyes, Lucas's reluctance. They trust Liliana, but they have no idea what Dorian might do. As the airport lights came into view, he tightened his grip on the wheel. "This is it, my chance to keep them safe, to remind them I'm still their father." In the hush of that moment, with distant runway lights flickering against the sky, Arden found renewed resolve. Liliana might have left him in the dust. Dorian might have planned a grand scheme, but Arden refused to concede. He'd follow them to the ends of the earth if it meant bringing Amelia and Lucas back before the situation spiraled beyond his control. A damp heat draped itself over the Nassau airport as Arden Blackwood and Callum Delacroix stepped off the plane. The mid-morning sun bore down with relentless force, but the gray smudge on the horizon hinted at storm clouds gathering offshore. Despite the inviting turquoise waters and white sandy beaches nearby, there was a distinct tension in the air like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. Callum wiped sweat from his brow. "Our contact's waiting just outside," he said, nodding toward a tall man leaning against a pillar. The man, dressed in a short-sleeved shirt and lightweight slacks, straightened when he spotted them. "Ramon Cruz," he introduced himself. His voice carried the smooth lilt of a local Bahamian accent. "Callum's given me the basics. You're searching for your 2 kids, your wife, and a man named Dorian Hayes?" Arden nodded stiffly. "They arrived last night on a private charter. We think they're at a secluded property, probably owned by Dorian. We need to find them. Fast. Ramon jerked his head toward the exit. I have a car ready. Let's talk on the way. As they headed through the bustling parking area, Arden felt a swirl of hope and dread. The plane ride from Boston had been a blur of phone calls, strategizing, and tense silence. Now the reality hit him. Amelia and Lucas were somewhere in this humid paradise, under Dorian's control. Liliana, too, though, after everything. His feelings about rescuing his wife were tangled in a knot of betrayal and old affection. They slid into a dark SUV, air conditioning blasting. While Callum navigated from the passenger seat, Ramon drove with casual confidence through the lively streets of Nassau, weaving past colorful buildings and rows of palm trees. Got some intel this morning, Ramon said, voice low. Hayes is indeed here. He's made waves with the local financial community. People whisper about money laundering. The FBI's had him on a watch list for months, but nothing definitive to arrest him. Meanwhile, the rumor is he's staying at a private estate near the southern coast. Arden's jaw tightened. Any sign of my children? Ramon glanced in the rearview mirror. Neighbors say a woman and 2 teenagers arrived with him. Matches your description. Arden exhaled sharply, relief and fear colliding. Then we know where to look. Callum twisted around in his seat. How do we get in? If Dorian's under watch, presumably they're waiting for him to slip up. Ramon navigated a roundabout. Local authorities have bigger problems, plus, we're expecting a tropical storm tonight, maybe stronger. It could be upgraded to a small hurricane if conditions worsen. This might work in our favor. Hayes won't expect you to come in bad weather. Arden considered that. The thought of confronting Dorian in the midst of a raging storm sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. He pictured Amelia, Lucas, possibly trapped or manipulated by Liliana's decisions. We can't wait, he said firmly. We go tonight. Ramon gave a curt nod. I'll arrange a boat or a safe route by land, depending on conditions. They soon arrived at a modest guest house on the outskirts of the city. Ramon parked in a gravel lot behind tall hedges. You can stay here. It's secure, off the main roads. No one will look for you. I'll be back at sundown with details. Once inside the small but comfortable dwelling, Arden tossed his duffel bag on a wicker chair, muscles tense with restless energy. Through the window, he could see the gathering clouds over the ocean, a deep gray bruise swelling on the horizon. Hell of a place for a family reunion, Callum remarked, running a hand through his short hair. We'd better gear up. If Dorian's aware we're coming, it won't be pretty. Arden nodded, opening his bag to check the contents: flashlights, lightweight night vision goggles, zip ties, and a few personal defensive tools. While B-Sec was in Boston, he'd brought enough to handle a stealth mission without stirring the local authorities. An uneasy hush settled between them. For a moment, Arden's thoughts drifted to Amelia and Lucas. How were they coping? Did Lucas have his cello with him? Was Amelia holding on to hope that her father would show up, or had she already fallen deeper under Dorian's sway? There's something else, Callum said quietly. I tapped a friend at the FBI's field office. They're close to nailing Hayes for large-scale money laundering, possibly tying him to the Fairfax family. They might raid him soon if they can lock down evidence. That's good, Arden replied, though the notion of a full-scale raid also sparked concern. But it could spook Dorian into moving the kids somewhere else. Callum shrugged. We'll get them out first, then let the feds do their job. Outside, a gust rattled the palm trees lining the yard. The thick, sticky air felt charged, like the calm before a torrential downpour. Arden stared at the billowing storm clouds. No matter what it takes, he vowed silently. I'm bringing my kids home. Late that evening, the storm front pressed in, darkening the sky with ominous clouds. Rain slashed sideways across the coastal road as Arden, Callum, and Ramon made their way south in a battered Land Rover, headlights cutting through the sheets of water. A howling wind bent the palms, sending fronds skittering across the asphalt. The estate was a sprawling compound perched on a rocky cliff overlooking the Atlantic, ringed by tall fencing and security cameras. According to Ramon's intel, Dorian had chosen it precisely for its isolation. Two SUVs were parked in the courtyard, their license plates matching the flight records from the day before. Arden killed the Land Rover's engine beneath a cluster of thick palms. The gloom and pouring rain provided cover. Lightning crackled over the sea, illuminating an imposing wrought-iron gate up ahead. Water sluiced down the windshield, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Ramon pointed to a small service entrance at the far end of the wall. "That path leads to the pool terrace. Security might be lighter there." He handed Callum a weatherproof phone. "I'll circle around. Keep watch from another angle. Call me if you need extraction." Callum nodded, and Ramon vanished into the storm-swept night. In the back seat, Arden steeled himself. He wore dark cargo pants, a waterproof jacket, and carried a small pack of gear. The memory of how he'd once performed covert missions in even harsher weather flickered in his mind, except this time, the targets he sought to extract were his own children. They slipped from the vehicle, boots squelching in mud. Rain pelted them like icy needles, making the approach agonizingly slow. At the service gate, Callum deftly picked the lock. Each thunderclap masked the metallic clicks of his tools. Lightning flashed, revealing a lush courtyard beyond. Tropical plants thrashed under the wind. Arden glimpsed an ornate patio deck, and through the sliding glass doors, the glow of interior lights. Keeping low, they crossed slick tiles until they pressed against a side wall. The roar of the storm muffled any noise they made. Inside, a security guard dozed in a corner chair, an empty coffee cup on a nearby table. Arden signaled to Callum, who crept up behind the man. With practiced efficiency, Callum clamped a hand over the guard's mouth, injecting a quick sedative. The guard slumped, quietly unconscious. Arden crouched, scanning the dim hallway. The patter of the storm outside mingled with the hum of air conditioning. Doors branched off, some locked, others partially open. He prayed Amelia and Lucas were somewhere in this labyrinth, unharmed. They inched forward, passing a spacious living area with glass walls. Light flickered from a TV. Two more guards were huddled there, flipping between channels, perhaps too distracted by the storm to expect intruders. Callum shot Arden a questioning look. "Should we engage?" Arden shook his head. "We find the kids first." Moving on, they spotted a staircase leading to the second floor. The power flickered momentarily as thunder boomed. By some stroke of luck, the guards downstairs seemed oblivious, either trusting the storm to deter any break-in or banking on Dorian's reputation for invulnerability. Upstairs, the corridor was lined with closed doors. Arden paused outside one, straining to hear. A muffled whimper drifted through the wood. He carefully turned the knob and pushed it open. Inside was a bedroom suite, lavishly furnished, with a balcony overlooking the raging sea. On the bed, Lucas lay motionless, half under the covers. Amelia knelt beside him, eyes wide with fear. She spun around at Arden's entrance, pressing a finger to her lips. "He's sedated," she whispered, voice quivering. "They gave him something after he argued with Dorian. I've been trying to keep him awake, but—" Relief and fury surged in Arden. He rushed over, brushing a hand across Lucas's sweat-dampened forehead. "Son," he murmured, but Lucas only gave a weak murmur, eyelids fluttering. Amelia's eyes welled up with tears. "I didn't know who to call," she confessed. "Mom's with Dorian downstairs. He's been so intense. I'm scared, Dad." Arden gently squeezed her shoulder. "It's okay. We're getting you both out." He motioned to Callum, who pulled a small medical kit from his pack. Quickly, they checked Lucas's vitals, concluding it was a standard benzodiazepine. He'd likely be groggy, but otherwise fine. Outside the door, a voice carried up the stairs. "Check on the kids! With this storm, I want them secure." Arden recognized Dorian's commanding tone. They had only seconds. Callum tucked an arm under Lucas's shoulders. "We move now," he hissed. Amelia helped them lift Lucas. The hallway outside remained empty for the moment, but footsteps soon pounded on the stairs. Callum ducked into the shadows, propping Lucas against the wall, while Arden and Amelia pressed flat behind a curtain. A guard appeared, shining a flashlight around. His beam grazed over the bed inside the dim room, noticing it empty. "Shit," he muttered, stepping in. Callum used the moment to signal Amelia forward, carrying Lucas as quietly as they could manage toward the stairwell. Arden brought up the rear, They made it to the top of the stairs when a shout echoed behind them. "They're here! Intruders!" The guard must have spotted the open door or sensed motion. Chaos erupted. Heavy boots thundered in pursuit. Amelia clung to Lucas, struggling with his weight. Callum swapped positions, guiding them from behind while Arden sprinted ahead, scanning for an exit route. The living room below remained occupied by 2 more guards, startled by the commotion. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the central atrium. Dorian Hayes stepped out from a side hallway, face twisted with fury. Liliana trailed behind him, eyes wide with alarm. "Arden?" she choked out, disbelief warring with some deeper emotion. Dorian pointed, voice booming above the storm's roar. "Stop them!" But Arden was already descending the stairs, leading his children and Callum toward the side entrance. Rain hammered the glass walls, thunder rattling the estate's foundation. If they could just reach the courtyard. A guard rushed forward, baton raised. Callum met him with a swift strike to the wrist, disarming him in a single fluid motion. Arden spun around, hooking an arm to block another attacker. Fists and flashlights collided in a blur, the pounding storm intensifying every desperate move. Amelia hunched over Lucas, shielding him from the scuffle. "Dad!" she cried, her voice trembling. "Go!" Arden shouted, tossing aside the guard. Dorian advanced, eyes gleaming in the strobing flashes of lightning. Liliana hovered near the corridor, indecision etched across her face. The seeds of doubt flickered in her gaze as she witnessed how far Dorian was willing to go. Still, she remained pinned in place by her own choices, uncertain which path to take. Callum scooped Lucas into a better hold, and Amelia grabbed his free arm. They stumbled toward the exit while Arden turned to face Dorian one-on-one. The storm outside howled, wind lashing the palm trees in a furious dance. Dorian snarled, "You won't take them from me, Blackwood!" Arden's grip tightened. "Watch me!" Lightning flared, and the next wave of thunder shook the estate to its core. The storm raged with a deafening roar as Arden squared off against Dorian Hayes in the estate's grand atrium. Sheets of rain slapped the glass walls, and each flash of lightning froze them in a tableau of seething tension. Callum, Amelia, and a barely conscious Lucas had managed to slip through a side passage, though Arden could hear more guards scrambling to cut them off. Dorian's eyes gleamed with unbridled anger. He clutched a sleek pistol in one hand, pointing it straight at Arden's chest. "Your heroics end here," he spat. "You think you can barge in and rescue them? This isn't a Hollywood movie." Arden's heart hammered. He raised his palms, stance measured. "Dorian, put the gun down. You've drugged my son, manipulated my family. Isn't it enough?" Lightning illuminated Dorian's sneer. "Not nearly. You took something precious from the Fairfaxes. Now I get to strip away everything you hold dear." He glanced briefly at the overhead balcony, where Liliana hovered in shock, eyes darting between them. Arden's mind reeled. He'd known about the Fairfax connection, but hearing Dorian confirm it so blatantly tightened a coil of dread in his gut. "This is all about revenge for a mission that happened years ago? That was war, Dorian. I never intended—" Dorian let out a harsh laugh, stepping closer. "Spare me your excuses. The Fairfaxes want justice for their lost son, and using Liliana using your own marriage was the perfect way to destroy you from the inside." Liliana gasped, her face ashen. "Dorian, you lied?" He flung her a disdainful look. "I told you enough truth to get your cooperation. Your dissatisfaction, your envy, they made you an easy ally." His sneer deepened. "But don't pretend you're innocent. You wanted Arden out of the picture, and I gave you the means." Liliana's lips trembled. "You said you cared about me, about the kids. Did I?" Dorian shrugged, scorn dripping from every syllable. "All I've cared about is fulfilling my obligation. Of course, the money was a nice perk." Anger and betrayal twisted Liliana's expression. She seemed paralyzed by the realization that the life she'd chosen with Dorian was built on manipulation. Arden seized the momentary distraction, edging sideways. If he could disarm Dorian, maybe he could prevent bloodshed, but the other man, despite his inflated ego, had a soldier's reflexes. He snapped the gun back onto Arden. "Move another inch and I'll put a bullet in you," Dorian growled. Suddenly, a piercing siren blared from outside, followed by a harsh spotlight sweeping the property. Through the windows, Arden glimpsed silhouettes of armed figures surging into the courtyard. The storm parted briefly to reveal local police and what looked like U.S. agents in dark windbreakers. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the scene like a macabre stage. "Federal agents!" a voice rang out. "Hands in the air, nobody move!" Dorian whirled, eyes flashing with panic. "No, no, they're too early!" He spun back toward Arden, fury etched into every line of his face. "Did you tip them off?" Arden shook his head, although relief coursed through him. He'd known the FBI had been building a case, but the timing was pure fortune. "Guess your ruse is done, Dorian." More shouts echoed through the estate. Guards skittered, some dropping weapons, others attempting to flee. The storm battered the property as the front doors burst open under the force of law enforcement. A wave of men in ballistic vests poured in, guns drawn. "Freeze!" they shouted. "On the ground now!" Dorian's face twisted, his grip on the pistol faltering. Desperation flickered in his eyes. "No, I won't let them take this from me. Not after all the planning. Lord Fairfax will—" "Stop!" Liliana suddenly cried, stepping forward. She placed herself between Dorian and Arden, arms outstretched. Fear and remorse contorted her features. "Dorian, don't do this. It's over." The clash of thunder underscored the moment. Dorian hesitated, confusion crossing his face as he stared at Liliana, blocking his line of fire. Then, with a snarl of frustration, he swung the gun toward her. Arden lunged, heart in his throat. In a flash, the muzzle swiveled back to him and a deafening crack shattered the air. He dove, adrenaline spiking, half expecting the searing pain of a bullet. Instead, a second shot boomed from behind one of the federal agents had fired. Dorian jerked, the pistol flying from his grasp. He collapsed onto the marble floor, blood staining his shoulder. The echo of gunfire hung in the air, mingled with the pounding of torrential rain. Liliana shrank back, eyes wide with horror. Seconds later, agents swarmed the atrium, pinning Dorian to the ground. "We have a suspect down!" one shouted into a radio, while another snapped cuffs onto Dorian's wrists. The storm raged on, but within the estate, it felt as though a deadly whirlwind had stilled. Arden stared at Dorian's prone form, relief and shock flooding him. The man who had nearly torn his family apart now lay wounded, undone by his own ambition. Liliana dropped to her knees, trembling hands covering her mouth. Tears ran down her cheeks, although whether they were for Dorian, for her shattered illusions, or for her own guilt, Arden couldn't tell. "Arden," she croaked, voice barely audible above the clamor. I didn't know it was this." He swallowed hard. "You still chose to side with him, even when I warned you." Her eyes flicked up to his, full of regret. "I was blinded by resentment, by promises. I never thought it would go this far." Another wave of tears threatened to spill. "What happens to me now?" Arden's expression remained steeled. "That's not for me to decide. The authorities will handle Dorian's crimes, and if they believe you were complicit." Liliana's face crumpled, but she gave a weak nod of acceptance. Agents converged, gently but firmly guiding her aside for questioning. In that moment, the weight of her decisions came crashing down. At last, Arden caught sight of Amelia and Lucas peering in from a hallway, with Callum hovering protectively. Amelia looked pale and shaken, but her face lit with relief when she saw her father standing. Lucas leaned heavily against the wall, still disoriented from the sedatives, but conscious enough to blink in recognition. Arden crossed the atrium in quick strides, ignoring the puddles of rainwater and the swirl of uniformed officers. He pulled Amelia and Lucas into a trembling embrace. "I'm so sorry you two went through this," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Amelia buried her face in his shoulder, tears escaping. "Dad, I was so scared. Lucas tried to stand up to Dorian and they drugged him." Lucas's breath hitched. I didn't believe you when you said Dorian was dangerous," he managed, guilt clouding his eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad." Arden simply hugged them tighter, gratitude surging. Thunder rattled the estate's windows, and outside the wind howled. But here, in the chaotic remnants of Dorian's downfall, they were safe at last. Callum stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Arden's shoulder. "We need to get them out of here. The feds will have questions, but they'll let you go once you identify yourselves." Arden nodded. "Let's do that. Then we're going home." He cast one final glance at Dorian Hayes, wounded, cuffed, staring blankly at the ceiling with hatred etched on his features. The grand facade of his plan lay in ruins, a testament to the destructive power of vengeance. Liliana stood nearby, huddled with an agent who took her statement. Her future remained uncertain, overshadowed by the choices she'd made. For Arden, the path forward was equally daunting. But as he guided Amelia and Lucas toward the exit, the storm outside felt less like a menace and more like a cleansing force. They had survived the darkest tempest in their family's history, emerging battered but intact. The next step was to rebuild whatever that might look like. 2 days later, the sun returned to the Bahamas as if to mock the devastation left by the tropical storm. Blue skies now stretched over the island, hinting at the paradise it was known to be. But for Arden Blackwood, the real storm had just begun its aftermath. He stood on a balcony at a small government-approved guest house, which served as a temporary lodging while the investigation wrapped up. Down in the courtyard, U.S. federal agents, Bahamian police, and a few suits from the local prosecutor's office moved about with brisk efficiency. Paperwork, interviews, and endless legal formalities dominated every waking moment. Callum emerged from an office below, waving a file. They've confirmed Dorian's involved in a broader money laundering ring. The FBI found offshore accounts linking him to the Fairfaxes, clear evidence of a vendetta. They're shipping him stateside soon. Arden ran a hand over the railing. What about Liliana? Callum's expression tightened. They've detained her for questioning. She admitted to some complicity, though she claims she didn't know about the Fairfax scheme. Just thought Dorian was helping her secure a divorce settlement. He paused, exhaling. She might face charges, but it's up to a court to decide how deeply she was involved in the fraud. A pang cut through Arden. Despite everything, Liliana had once been the woman he cherished. Seeing her escorted away in cuffs, shell-shocked by the betrayal and her own role in the fiasco, left him conflicted. And the kids? Amelia's inside, giving a statement to an agent. Lucas is at the local clinic, just for a final check on the sedation he was under. He should be released by evening. Arden gave a curt nod. Thank you, Callum, for everything. His friend clapped him on the shoulder. Hey, it's not over yet, but we've pulled them out of Dorian's clutches. That's what matters. They stepped inside, where Amelia sat at a table, finishing her interview with a federal investigator named Agent Morrow. The slender, middle-aged man tapped a final note into his laptop and gave Amelia a kind smile. Thank you, Miss Blackwood, Morrow said gently. That helps us piece together the timeline of events. Amelia, pale but composed, nodded. You're welcome. I just want to go home. She flicked a glance at Arden, relief blending with lingering hurt. Dad, can we leave soon? Arden ruffled her hair lightly, the gesture small yet comforting. Soon as Lucas is cleared. We'll head back to Boston. She rose, hugging him. I was so stupid to trust Dorian. He gave us all these promises, scholarships, adventures. It sounded too good, but I wanted to believe Mom. Arden felt that stinging regret in her tone. All that matters is you're safe now, he whispered, pulling her close. We'll figure out everything else. Agent Morrow cleared his throat, approaching Arden. Mr. Blackwood, I'd like to debrief you and your daughter one more time before you go, specifically about the confrontation with Mr. Hayes. Arden sighed but nodded. He'd grown accustomed to repeating the same account how Dorian had drugged Lucas, threatened them, and ultimately pulled a gun. Of course, he said, though the thought of reliving that night set his nerves on edge. Before Morrow could continue, a nurse from the clinic next door ducked into the room, spotting Amelia. Your brother's awake and asking for you, she said quietly. Amelia's eyes lit with relief. I'm going. Arden gave her an encouraging nod. Go see him. He and Callum watched as she hurried out behind the nurse, hopeful energy in her step for the first time in days. Agent Morrow's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then apologized. I need to step out. We'll pick this back up soon. With that, he strode off, leaving Arden and Callum in the makeshift interview space. A silent moment passed. Papers rustled on the nearby table. Outside, the bright Caribbean sun and the scent of salt air felt incongruously peaceful compared to the turmoil that had erupted here just nights ago. Finally, Callum spoke. You realize this is just the start, right? Court cases, depositions, the divorce proceedings. not to mention the consequences for Liliana. Arden nodded, heaviness settling on his shoulders. I know. But at least Amelia and Lucas are out of immediate danger. That's the priority. They fell silent again, each lost in thought. The swirl of upcoming legal battles, the press hounding for a story about the ex-military security entrepreneur who faced off against a high society fraudster, it all seemed inevitable. Yet Arden clung to a glimmer of hope. The worst was over, even if the path ahead remained murky. At that moment, Amelia returned with Lucas in a wheelchair, a nurse behind them. Though pale and sporting dark circles under his eyes, Lucas offered a shaky smile. I'm fine, he insisted. Just a little woozy. They said I can travel tomorrow. Arden crouched beside him, relief flooding him anew. We'll get you home, I promise. Lucas reached for his father's hand, the teen bravado melting into gratitude. Thanks, Dad. Callum patted the boy's shoulder. Tough kid. You'll be back on your cello soon. A shy grin tugged at Lucas's lips. Yeah, maybe with less drama next time. Despite the somber setting, a small ripple of laughter passed between them. Agent Morrow reappeared, looking mildly apologetic about the next round of questions. But for the moment, the Blackwood family and Callum were together, safe from Dorian Hayes's manipulations. Arden pushed Lucas's wheelchair outside, letting the sun warm their faces. Amelia followed, pressing close to her father. The sea breeze ruffled their hair, and for just an instant, Arden allowed himself to imagine a simpler tomorrow one with no threats, no secrets. He knew the legal storm wasn't fully cleared, but for the first time in days, a measure of calm settled in his heart. They had survived the turmoil. Now they could begin picking up the pieces, even if it meant facing the consequences of Liliana's actions and the complicated emotional fallout. But that, at least, was a struggle they'd fight on their own terms, far from the tropical estate that had nearly been their undoing. The crisp autumn air in Boston felt worlds away from the humid storms of the Bahamas. Arden Blackwood exited the courthouse, flanked by Callum Delacroix and Amelia, who clutched a bag full of court documents. Overhead, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the steps, while a brisk wind tugged at their jackets. Dad, is that it? Amelia asked, her voice quiet but hopeful. Arden inhaled slowly, letting the cool air soothe nerves that had been raw for weeks. For now, Judge Alistair Rowland's hearing has been scheduled, and Liliana's cooperating with the prosecution. That means she might get a reduced sentence. Callum, checking his phone, nodded. Rumor says Rowland used his position to expedite Dorian's shady motions in multiple cases. Now that everything's exposed, the state's thrown the book at him. Arden squeezed Amelia's shoulder. Since returning from the Bahamas, they'd spent days in legal meetings, depositions, and formal interviews with the FBI. Dorian Hayes remained in federal custody, charged with money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy linked to the Fairfax clan. Liliana, meanwhile, was in a local detention center, facing charges of collusion and financial misconduct, though her cooperation might lessen the outcome. As they descended the courthouse steps, reporters clustered by barricades, cameras clicking. A flurry of voices erupted. Mr. Blackwood, how do you feel about your wife's involvement? Is it true you threatened Judge Rowland's career? Any comment on the Fairfax connection? Arden clenched his jaw, ignoring the cacophony. Callum guided Amelia through the throng of microphones and flashing lights. A short walk later, they reached a black SUV, courtesy of Blackwood Security's discreet driver. Safely inside, the dull roar of the crowd faded. It never ends, does it? Amelia murmured, watching the reporters retreat. Arden exhaled, glancing at her pensive expression. We'll deal with the media. The important thing is, we have a path forward. The court is acknowledging Liliana's partial cooperation. Mom said she'd write me, Amelia said, but I don't know if I should reply. Callum placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Give it time. She made mistakes, but she's still your mother. Arden started the engine, his gaze on the busy Boston street. We'll figure this out. Right now, let's get you home, and then I have a meeting with Madeline Shore about finalizing the divorce process. Once that's sorted, we can all take a breath. A subdued silence lingered as they drove away from the courthouse. The trial might have begun, but the emotional fallout still loomed. The city's bustle felt strangely distant, as though they were passing through it in a protective bubble together, yet weighed down by everything that had happened. A month later, a battered pickup truck rumbled down a winding dirt road in the heart of Montana. Arden squinted at a hand-drawn map, guiding the way to a secluded property he'd acquired under the Blackwood family trust. Next to him, Lucas stared out the window, entranced by the vast fields under an endless sky. Amelia followed in a second vehicle with Callum, carrying supplies and luggage. Eventually, they reached a wooden arch marking the entrance. A narrow lane led them past acres of tall grass and clusters of pine, opening up to a modest ranch house nestled near a gently sloping hill. Arden cut the engine, stepping out onto earth that felt tangibly free of Boston's legal entanglements. "Wow," Lucas breathed. "It's huge out here." Arden smiled, a flicker of relief warming him. We needed somewhere peaceful, a place to rebuild after everything. Within minutes, Amelia and Callum pulled up, stepping onto the gravel with awe. The ranch house, though simple, stood sturdy against the panoramic backdrop of rolling plains and distant mountains. Fresh air filled their lungs, carrying a faint scent of pine and wild sage. "It's a fixer-upper," Arden admitted, striding to the wooden porch. "But I figured we could make it a home, if you two want." Lucas ran a hand over the old railing. "I like it. Feels real, not fancy or pretentious." Amelia set down her backpack, her eyes reflecting the open sky. "I'm not used to so much quiet." Then a small smile touched her lips. "But I think that's what we need right now." Callum joined them, arms crossed over his broad chest. "We have enough supplies for a month. I'll stay a couple weeks to help you settle, then head back to BSEC. Unless you need me longer." Arden shook his hand in gratitude. "We'll manage. Thank you for everything." They spent the afternoon unpacking boxes. The house had bare-bones furniture, a few tables, and mismatched chairs. Arden planned to keep it modest. This wasn't meant to be an ostentatious retreat, but rather a place for healing. As the sun lowered, painting the horizon in shades of peach and lavender, Amelia and Lucas helped haul in groceries and bedding. Later, they gathered around a small fire pit outside. The Montana sky stretched overhead in a dazzling spread of stars, free from city lights. A gentle breeze whispered through the tall grass. "This is so different from Boston," Amelia mused, warming her hands by the flames. "It feels like we can breathe again." Lucas tuned the second-hand acoustic guitar he'd found in a local shop earlier that day. Although his true passion was the cello, he admitted the guitar was easier to carry around the ranch. He plucked a few strings, soft chords melding with the crackle of fire. "It's not the same as the cello," he said, "but I like it." Arden watched his children, heart aching with gratitude that they were safe. The trauma of Liliana's betrayal, Dorian's manipulations, and even the glimpse of jail time in Liliana's future still lingered. But here, under the star-filled sky, he felt a kind of peace he hadn't known in years. "You kids know," Callum remarked, flicking a glance at them, "this place can be your blank slate. No more high society, just honest work, fresh air, and time to figure out what you truly want." Amelia exhaled. "I was so obsessed with that glamorous life. Mom showed us private jets, fancy schools. Now I just want something real." Lucas strummed a gentle tune, reflecting the mood of the night. "Yeah, I'm done chasing illusions." Arden rested a hand on his knee, the dancing firelight revealing the faint scars on his knuckles from old missions. "We can make a new start. As a family, whatever that looks like now. I won't push you. If you decide you miss city life, we'll adapt." Amelia and Lucas exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. "For now," Amelia said, "let's stay here. Finish our schooling with online courses or whatever you can set up, at least until things calm down in Boston." Arden nodded, eyes misting. This was all he'd hoped for after the turmoil, a chance to reconnect without the pressure of Dorian, the divorce scandal, or the gaze of society's gossip mill. Behind them, the ranch house windows glowed warmly, promising shelter in the vastness of Montana's open land. For the first time since the day Liliana slammed divorce papers onto the table, Arden felt certain they were on the right path. Not easy, not smooth, but honest. They lingered by the fire until late, swapping stories of old memories and fresh dreams. Amelia teased Lucas about his earlier attempts at songwriting, while Lucas threatened to compose a ballad about goats. He'd spotted some wandering near a fence line. Callum recalled a daring mission with Arden from their military days, skirting around any graphic details, but painting enough excitement to elicit gasps from the twins. Eventually, the moon rose high. One by one, they snuffed out the fire and retreated inside, hearts lighter for having found this refuge a place where healing could root itself, free from the shadow of betrayal. 2 weeks later, a thin layer of morning mist clung to the fields as a battered postal truck rumbled down the dirt road, delivering mail to the ranch. Amelia fetched the letters, scanning them curiously. Among the usual bills and ads was an envelope with bold handwriting addressed to her and Lucas. She recognized the sender, Liliana Blackwood, inmate 34791. Her stomach twisted as she carried the envelope to the kitchen where Lucas flipped pancakes on a cast-iron skillet. Arden sipped coffee, eyes flicking to the mail in her hand. "Mom wrote us," Amelia said quietly. She set the envelope on the table, uncertain how to proceed. Lucas switched off the burner. "Should we read it together?" Amelia nodded, sliding into a chair. Arden rose from the table. "I'll give you two some space," he offered, heading out to the porch. He understood that this moment was theirs to handle, free from his direct influence. Alone, the twins shared a tense look. Amelia tore open the envelope, pulling out a few pages of lined paper. Liliana's script filled the sheets in hurried, emotional strokes. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, not after everything that's happened. I can only hope you'll one day understand how I got pulled into Dorian's lies and my own frustrations with your father. I see now how blind I was." The letter continued, detailing Liliana's regret. How she once believed Arden's long work hours meant he didn't care. How Dorian's lavish promises clouded her judgment. She mentioned the humiliating revelation of Dorian's real motives and the heartbreak of realizing she was a pawn in the Fairfax vendetta. The pages ended with an earnest apology and a request to write back if they felt ready. Lucas's eyes glistened with tears he tried to hide. Amelia folded the letter, voice trembling. "She sounds sincere. I don't know how to feel." His jaw tightened. "She betrayed Dad. She manipulated us to side with Dorian." He paused, swallowing. "But she's still our mom." Amelia set the letter down gently. "We can't just forget what she did, but maybe we shouldn't shut her out entirely. She's facing real prison time." They sat in fraught silence, the ticking clock amplifying their conflicted thoughts. Eventually, Lucas spoke. "I think we should reply. Not promise forgiveness, but let her know we got the letter." Amelia nodded, relief and apprehension warring in her expression. "Yeah, we'll keep it honest. Tell her it'll take time to rebuild trust." They rose from the table, stepping onto the porch where Arden stood, gazing across the fields with a thoughtful expression. He turned, noticing their somber faces. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Amelia nodded. "Mom's letter. She's remorseful. We're going to write back." She studied her father's reaction, bracing for disapproval. Arden exhaled slowly. "That's your choice. I won't stand in the way." Though a flash of pain ghosted across his face, he forced a reassuring smile. "I've always said you two can decide how to handle your relationship with her." Lucas met his gaze. "We just don't know if we can ever forgive her completely. But shutting her out feels wrong too." Arden placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Feelings like that aren't simple. Take it day by day. You're allowed to be hurt and cautious." In the following days, Amelia and Lucas crafted a cautious reply, acknowledging their mother's remorse while clarifying the deep hurt they felt. They didn't send immediate absolution, yet they offered a small olive branch of communication. Meanwhile, Liliana's subsequent letters swung between raw guilt, flashes of anger at herself, and longing for a future where her children might forgive her. Arden, for his part, stayed out of their correspondence. He busied himself with ranch chores, mending fences, learning basic horse care from a local farmer. The physical labor, under Montana's endless sky, provided a sense of grounding. Every now and then, he'd catch Amelia playing old songs on Lucas's acoustic guitar, or watch Lucas practicing scales on a borrowed cello from a nearby music enthusiast. The weight of heartbreak gradually lessened, replaced by a cautious hope. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the mountains, a soft breeze carried the scent of hay and wildflowers into the living room. The siblings sat at the worn wooden table, writing another note to Liliana. Their expressions were resolute, no longer purely angry or confused, but nuanced, reflecting a desire to navigate a path toward tenuous reconciliation. Arden paused in the doorway, observing them in quiet admiration. Despite the wounds, they were forging their own course. The ranch, this modest refuge, was slowly becoming a place of growth and reflection. As he stepped onto the porch, he felt the weight of the setting sun on his shoulders. The path ahead still included finalizing the divorce and the question of Liliana's sentencing. Judge Rowland's upcoming trial promised more revelations about Dorian's schemes and the Fairfax family's involvement. Yet a calm certainty washed over him. Whatever lay in store, they would face it together stronger for all they'd endured. A gentle summer breeze rustled the tall grass bordering the ranch house. Under a radiant Montana sunset, Amelia and Lucas stood side by side on the porch, sipping iced tea. Their voices carried the easy cadence of two siblings who had weathered storms few their age could imagine. Arden sat on the porch swing, eyes half closed as he soaked in the twilight colors. The once imposing figure, shaped by years of military and corporate battles, now radiated a more settled aura, tempered by the ranch's steady rhythm. A faint scar on his right arm bore testament to the confrontation with Dorian, a reminder of past battles no longer dominating his life. "You guys sure you want to head back east for college?" Arden teased gently, rocking on the swing. "Thought we converted you into country kids." Lucas laughed, setting down his tea. Over the past 3 years, he had grown taller, his face sharper, yet softened by a consistent contentment gleaned from hours practicing music in the wide-open fields. "I'll miss this place. But a full scholarship at a prestigious conservatory? Hard to pass up." Amelia nodded in agreement, her hair braided back as she prepared for a path in environmental studies. "And I want to focus on sustainable ranching techniques. We can apply them here someday." Arden's chest swelled with pride. 3 years of relative peace had done wonders. Lucas blossomed as a musician, already performing at local recitals. Amelia channeled her passions into environmental activism, balancing online coursework with Hanson Ranch management. The scars from Liliana's betrayal remained but had faded, replaced by an acceptance of the complex tapestry that was their family history. They lapsed into silence, lulled by the hum of dusk. A distant line of mountains glowed orange at their peaks, the sky above transitioning into deep purples. A subtle melody wafted from inside the house, Callum strumming on Lucas's old guitar. He often visited, using the ranch as a retreat when city stress mounted at BSEC. Speaking of BSEC, Arden now played a more advisory role. Day-to-day operations fell to a new CEO. He and Callum had groomed an arrangement that let Arden focus on personal life while ensuring the company thrived. The trust remained intact, safeguarding Amelia and Lucas's inheritance while also guaranteeing their educational aspirations. After a moment, Amelia glanced at her phone, the screen displaying a message. "Dad," she said softly, "Mom wrote again. She might be up for parole next year." Arden's brows lifted. "Already? The court gave her a reduced sentence for cooperating, but I thought it'd be at least 2 more years." Amelia shrugged. "She's been on good behavior, volunteering in the prison library. She asked if we'd consider visiting once we're back in the city." Lucas set aside his iced tea, tension flickering across his features. "We've talked to her sporadically. Some letters, a call or two." He paused. "She sounds genuine about wanting to mend fences." Arden massaged the porch swing's armrest, recalling the heartbreak that culminated in Liliana's arrest. Over the years, her letters displayed a profound shift. Gone was the defensive anger, replaced by deep remorse and a desire to reconnect. He had maintained a polite distance, allowing Amelia and Lucas to choose their level of involvement. For himself, the wounds ran deeper. "How do you two feel about a visit?" he asked gently. Amelia exchanged a look with Lucas. "We're open to it," she said. "Not sure we can ever fully trust her again, but people can change. She's still our mom." A pensive smile ghosted across Arden's lips. "And if she does get parole, she'll need guidance to reintegrate. Might be better for her and for you to see each other in person." Lucas inhaled slowly. "We'll approach it carefully. We've built a good life here. We don't want drama to tear it apart." Arden's chest tightened, both proud of their maturity and sad that they had to weigh such considerations at all. "All right, let me know when you plan to visit her and I'll support you however I can." Another lull in conversation settled. The sky had darkened further, stars pricking the velvet dome overhead. Amelia rose, stretching. "I'm going to pack some more for college. Still can't believe we leave next week." Lucas followed, ruffling her hair in sibling camaraderie. "Yeah, guess I need to figure out what to do with my music equipment until then." They vanished into the house, leaving Arden alone on the porch swing. The soft strumming of Callum's guitar drifted out, weaving with the chirrups of nearby crickets. Arden gazed at the horizon, a swirl of gratitude, reflection, and anticipation coiling within him. 3 years ago, the name Dorian Hayes had been an ever-present threat. Now it was a cautionary tale he remained imprisoned, facing a lengthy sentence. The Fairfax family's empire lay in disarray, dismantled by the FBI investigations. And Liliana, the woman who once walked away with such cold finality, now sought a cautious redemption. Arden closed his eyes, letting a gentle breeze rustle through his hair. If someone told him on his 45th birthday that he'd end up running a ranch in Montana with 2 nearly grown kids, he would have laughed in disbelief. Yet this life, forged from crisis and redemption, felt more authentic than any gala or high-rise boardroom. Footsteps approached. Callum stepped out, guitar slung over his shoulder. "Thought you could use some company, old friend." Arden chuckled. "Sure, old friend, indeed." He patted the bench. Plenty of room. They sat side by side, listening to the nocturnal symphony of rustling grass and distant coyotes. Overhead, stars stretched like a cosmic tapestry. In that hush, Arden felt the subtle hum of peace, knowing that while life remained imperfect, they had come through the darkest trials. "Here's to new beginnings," Callum said, picking a slow tune on the guitar. His low baritone hummed a spontaneous melody about second chances and open skies. Arden let the music wash over him, recalling a phrase from Liliana's last letter to Amelia and Lucas. "If we have tomorrow, maybe we can find a way forward together." The words resonated in the starlit silence. Though tomorrow brought no guarantees, it offered a space where healing could continue, a testament to how far they had come. He gazed at the ranch house, warm light glowing through the windows, silhouettes of Amelia and Lucas packing for the next chapter of their lives. The notion of them leaving for college soon both ached and relieved him. They were strong now, equipped with resilience and self-awareness. His job was to cheer them on, keep the porch light burning if they ever needed to return. With a contented sigh, Arden let his gaze drift back to the horizon. In the western sky, the last traces of sunset fused with the soft gleam of emerging stars, an emblem of endings and beginnings blending seamlessly, promising that even after the darkest storms, a new day always dawned. "Hey, listeners of Lady Cheating Tales,"